Steve Outtrim, welcome back to the Gnostic Media Podcast for part 4 of Silicon Valley's secret weapon, the shadow history of burners. Welcome today.
Hi, Jan. Thanks for having me back.
And what are we calling part 4?
This part is Occult Rituals of the Cult.
Nice. And so this is exciting stuff. We just blew the connections to Satanism wide open. So now let's bring it back full circle and show the audience how it connects directly into Burning Man. They might still be questioning a little bit how that connection is there. So where do you want to begin?
Yeah, so I think in the previous 3 parts, we've sort of been laying a foundation of the when and the where. It's very significant that Burning Man started in 1986, basically the same time as the launch of the internet and the World Wide Web. It's also very significant that it started right next to the Presidio military base, and the Church of Satan started right next to the Presidio military base as well. So having explored all of those connections, it now gives us a foundation, and I think from here on we can really focus in on Burning Man a bit more, but we're not quite ready to get out to the desert side of Burning Man just yet. So we're still looking at the origins of Burning Man down on the beaches of San Francisco next to the Presidio. Having a quick look at my introductory slide here, I'll share the screen to bring that up. So there was quite a lot of press at Burning Man. I believe it was last year's one. Susan Sarandon went there with Timothy Leary's ashes, and they had a ceremony and a parade where they all took some sacrament. You know, your guess is as good as mine as what was in the sacrament, but I think we can all probably guess. And some rumors are that some of Leary's ashes were actually added to the sacrament. I mean, there's no way to verify that one. But there's footage on YouTube of this big procession happening where they all went to the temple, which is pictured on the top right of my slide here. And so this was actually created as part of the ritual where Susan Sarandon took Timothy Leary's ashes to Burning Man. They drank some sacrament. The ashes may or may not have been added to the sacrament. Hallucinogens possibly could have been in there. It was Burning Man, after all, honoring Leary, the godfather of hallucinogens. And they created this temple, and this shows some of the occult things that go on at Burning Man. That they have a major effigy burn on the Saturday night. They create their own temple on the Sunday night, which is like a central kind of symbolic burn. But throughout the event are art projects, temples, statues, and the ritual ceremonies can be held around the destruction of all of these events. And in the case of Susan Sarandon, it was quite heavily publicized. She went on a lot of talk shows talking about it. You can see the video of the parade on YouTube. And she's very much an advocate for Timothy Leary. She's saying that the young people today who take drugs, if they don't know who Timothy Leary is, they should be ashamed of themselves. And I think he's still very much seen as a guru in many in the counterculture circles. What do you think, Jan?
Well, they did use him as a scapegoat to cover up the larger MKUltra operation. So a lot of people in the public have, an animosity to him, not realizing that not only was he CIA, but the whole thing was, CIA or intelligence. So, he's been, outed as the scapegoat, which is fitting for this series. But again, it's just a false presentation. It's all dog and pony.
I think much more was done down here. There was a much wider range. There were more doctors involved. There were more scientists involved.
We had Gerald and Aldous.
Yes, right, yeah. And Ivan, of course. Then, of course, it was part of the coolness of the Los Angeles cell, whatever you want to call it, that they kept a, you kept a...
Well, you might not call it a cell. Let's call it a cluster.
Our undercover agents in Los Angeles were very cool about, and yet they did more in a very laid-back way. And it's never been as public as some of the other, the buses running around the country.
Yeah, and then Zinberg says that.
So anyway, that's an example from that temple there. They construct a very elaborate thing like that. They burn it down. They have a ritual around it. You see that the image in the middle of the slide under the word cult. You've got people with the horns, the goat again, the pan. They're standing up on stilts, so you're forced to look up higher towards them. And I went to a regional Burning Man event in New Zealand, and was only 500 or 600 people. They really hadn't got the full experience of the Nevada Burning Man there. But what was interesting is they did have these elements. They had the horn goat god, the pan god. They had the people walking around on stilts, and you had to look up to the horn god. It was actually above you. So that's a motif that's repeated quite a lot, thematically in Burning Man. You see also that there's a sign there about sodomy, and there are many, many camps at Burning Man promoting these activities. And one of the things that you'll see as we look at Burning Man deeper and deeper is that there's this incredibly convenient mask of irony. So you can say, hey, we're worshipping Satan, we're in a pentagram, but we're being ironic. And you never really know at Burning Man when you see these things. But generally, if you see a big sign like that at a tent promoting sodomy, there probably is sodomy going on behind the sign. Your chances are 95% likely that it's there, and maybe 5% that someone's just having a big joke to see who gets sucked into it.
And not only that, though, but it's promoting pedophilia there.
Well, they're very, very adamant that children must be allowed to be present. There must be nudity permissible, and children must be present. And these are things that they're ready to go and sue the government all the way to the Supreme Court on, insisting that the children are present and that the nudity is present as well.
And, of course, Peter Lamborn Wilson is who created the idea of the autonomous zone. And, these areas where there's lawlessness and where they can diddle children and, impose themselves on other people who are too young to know otherwise is, part of this. So you've got Peter Lamborn Wilson and NAMBLA, and then you also have this whole thing from Wilhelm Reich and Margaret Mead, who promoted the whole sexual liberation thing, and then that goes up into Bronislaw Malinowski and the whole foundation of weaponized anthropology.
Yeah, and I think you could also add to the list of connections there Crowley, who believed that children should be exposed to every form of sexual activity by the age of 13. And that's certainly facilitated at Burning Man, but I think that you can look at our entire, in 2016, our education system and our entertainment system. Kids are being, taught in school about things like sodomy, about the LGBT lifestyle and polyamory and things like that. And who suddenly decided that was okay? That seems like a major shift in our civilization.
And what they did was they started with sex education in schools between man and woman, and now they've taken it to sodomy and transgender and all of this other nonsense to impose on children. And of course, children would have never had these ideas unless they were seeded into them as children, and then they're told, "Oh, well, you're suppressed. You've got to try all of these different things."
Yeah, and certainly at Burning Man, you're presented with a buffet of everything that civilization has to offer, just as the internet presents you with that same variety. So let's get started on this and get into the presentation. There's some other occult symbols there, the all-seeing eye, the mask. We'll drill into some of this a bit later on. But coming down to Burning Man and where did the idea come from? So we're going to do a separate episode where we go through really some of the key people involved in Burning Man, who they are and where they've come from. But the main figure behind it all is a guy called Larry Harvey. So he's considered the official founder of Burning Man. And in the ownership structure of Burning Man today, as far as we know, there are 6 people who are considered founders, who are the owners of the brand name and the intellectual property that gets licensed back to the non-profit. And of those 6 people, Larry Harvey is the only one who was actually at the first Burning Man. The next guy on the list shows up at the 4th Burning Man. And then the CEO, Marion Goodell, her first Burning Man was number 10. So really, we almost entirely have to go on Larry Harvey's word in the stories of the origins of Burning Man. But the problem with that is that even by his own word, there are contradictions. And I think just as in previous episodes we've had a coincidence counter, I wouldn't mind to start a contradiction counter, because we're going to encounter more and more contradictions as we look into this story. But the very first contradiction comes around from, in the official version of Events of Burning Man, it was founded at Baker Beach, next to the Presidio, on June 21st, the North Solstice of 1986. But let's go have a look at this clip now, clip 35.
I started this on a whim 10 years ago.
On the beach?
On the beach, on the solstice. It seemed a good idea to go down at sundown and light a man on fire.
How did all this begin?
Well, it began spontaneously, as a playful impulse. It was the summer solstice, late June in 1985, the longest day of the year. A friend and I went down to the beach at sundown. We'd cobbled together a stick man made from scrap lumber. He wasn't very tall, about 8 or 10 feet, but then even someone an inch or two taller than one commands some degree of respect. 10 feet tall against a flat horizon seemed larger than life. So we soaked him in gasoline, because we didn't know any better. And when he was lit, he simply incandesced. For a moment, it turned night into day.
So for 5 years since then, we've tried by means of conscious art to recapture, to reproduce that spirit. And as we've attempted to do so, he's grown larger and more elaborate with each successive incarnation.
So there you see Larry Harvey's actually saying 1985. And then there's another interview he's doing in 1994 where he's saying this was 10 years before. I've also got on my slide here at the bottom excerpts from 2 articles. One is from Spin magazine in 1995. It says that Burning Man was started in 1985. And one is from the Whole Earth Review in 1990. The Whole Earth Review 1991 by Louis Brill, who is the founder of the Cacophony Society in 1986. So he's also saying 85. So the official story is 86, but we've got the founder saying to multiple people 85. That's contradiction number 1. And then I want to highlight a coincidence here as well. So this quote from Larry Harvey is from a book by Brian Doherty, This is Burning Man. And this is kind of the definitive history of Burning Man, certainly the official history. He spent a lot of time with the founders, really getting to know them, and did a good job of tracing the story of all these colorful characters coming together. The problem is he appears to either have taken some things on face value or possibly misunderstood or misinterpreted some things, because I have one of his witnesses in the book telling me a different story. And as we'll go into it, there's another story of the origins of Burning Man. But here's Larry Harvey saying, or Brian Doherty describing Larry, saying, Larry is contemptuous of those who deny unconscious motivations, who are maddened with a hubristic certainty that they, the conscious they, are always in charge. When struggling, as I tried to make him do, to get to the deepest bottom of why, he remembers a time in his life around the beginning of the Burning Man ritual in which he would quiet his mind, and ideas and memories and notions sunk in there would float to the surface of his mind as if it were black water. It's not as if I recovered a repressed memory like, oh yes, father put on the Satan horns, and oh yes, mother was there too, I remember it, yes. But the things were haunting him, things he doesn't fully understand. Now, here's the official story in the official book of the foundation of Burning Man, and there's Satan in the story, you know. I mean, he just keeps cropping up here again and again and again. It's quite a strange thing for someone to say this, I think. And the other thing I want to highlight here is that he's mentioned as if it were black water, and of course, black water is the notorious mercenary army, and it's gonna come up again, but it's a phrase that he discusses several times. So if we move on to the next slide, and perhaps we can also just play the next clip, 31, and then I'll discuss the slide.
Well, we emerged from a bohemian scene in San Francisco in the mid '80s. San Francisco's good for that, and it couldn't have started in L.A. They would have wanted to know who the producer was and what stars were signed up, and whereas San Francisco is a haven for amateur efforts, and of course amateur means doing something for the love of it, and that's what we were doing. So we started on a beach, and as the gesture of an hour and the effort of a day, and
then you burned the man.
We burned a man. It was 2 feet taller than us, which required that we look up a little, and that's all you need. And
why did you do that?
Well, I've made up 7 or 8 stories about it because people want a myth, and they're all true. But frankly, someone asked me the other day, well, what was really on your mind? And I don't even remember. I remember calling a friend and saying, let's build a man and burn it on the beach today, and he asked me to repeat that statement. But I don't remember anything before that phone call. It's swathed in amnesia, probably because it was like so much that's creative. It just came out of the black water. It just materialized in front of me, probably largely due to subconscious processes that were going on, you know. You have to be willing to face what you don't know, and people keep asking me how I started it, and I've got all these stories I tell. The fact of the matter is I remember calling someone supposedly right after I thought of it, but I don't remember proposing to go do that. But I don't remember it because it came out of the black water. It just came out and assembled itself in front of me, and I thought, well, okay, I am that, and I must do it. And it's that simple. But you talk about the internet and the proclivity of people from Silicon Valley to come for attending it, and part of that, I think, is because Silicon Valley, the engineers there are constantly working on a frontier. They go where no one's been. And, well, the art process is like that, too. And that was our whole history, that things came out of that dark unknown. And
So there you see again, like Larry Harvey, he keeps, you know, he's made up all of these stories. He's got all these stories he tells about where Burning Man came from. They're all true. You know, 8 different stories are all true. Like, yeah, right. And he keeps mentioning this black water. Now, I want to introduce another character here to the story, who's a guy called Michael Flash Hopkins. And he was called by SF Gate, which is an online site of the newspaper in San Francisco, the godfather of Burning Man. And I don't think perhaps they mean it in a spiritual sense, but I took it to mean that was more in the sense of the godfather of the movie. But this guy's been there from the very start. He's a Harvard-educated guy. He has a TV show called Doing Da Vinci on the Discovery Channel, and Burning Man's theme this year is Da Vinci's Workshop. So he's very much involved, and in these 2 stories, he puts himself at the very first Burning Man, which in Brian Doherty's book and the other official stories, he isn't there. So that's another contradiction. He says, Larry and Jerry and I, that's a guy called Jerry James, I built the first one. It's not a man, it's a woman, and her name is Patricia. Larry was upset that she wasn't letting him see his child. He was really upset with it, so he decided to build an effigy of Pat and burn her. And we decided it wouldn't be good to do it out in front of her house. We decided it would be better if we brought it down to the beach and did it down at the beach. So we burned her because Mary Grauberger at the time was down there doing this sort of witchy-poo rituals down there, sort of a Wicker Man-style spring thing there. So we decided to bring it down there and burn it down there. And it's never been a man, it's always been a woman. And you can just look at the shape of it and you'll notice that it has like really shapely hips. It's always been a secret joke with us because it's never been a man. It was always a woman. But, you know, we realized, though, if we ever said it was a burning woman, we never have any women out there. They think that we were just He-Man women haters by calling it Burning Man. I mean, girls were definitely into that. They're like, oh yeah, burn the man. As long as the man isn't named, Matthew or something, they're like, yeah, I don't care who it is, burn him. It's kind of a funny way to do it, calling it a burning man. It was much more socially acceptable, especially in San Francisco. So it was kind of a joke. It was a joke to begin with, a big farce. In one respect, it wasn't the sacredness of it all or the spiritualness of it all. We weren't on a journey to the sacred. He was just a little upset with Patricia and decided that he should, burn her and this would get it out of his soul or whatever. Another way is venting his anger. So we built Patricia in my mother-in-law's basement, took it out to the beach and burned it where Mary was burning her stuff. It didn't even look like the Wicker Man. Mary was building something that looked like the Wicker Man, but we built something that looked like Pat. So
Wow.
we've all had problems with ex-girlfriends, Scarlet Women, whatever. Have you ever made a 8-foot high effigy of one and taken it to the beach to burn it as a way to get over a relationship?
No, not yet. But now that you brought it up, maybe I should, huh?
Yeah.
And years ago, there was a festival. I went to one maybe 10, 15 years ago that was called Burning Woman, and it was out here in the Mojave Desert in California, out past Kramer Junction.
Yeah, and they have ones like Water Woman. I mean, there are all kinds of variations, and there's actually a festival. I think it's in Santa Fe called Zozobra, and they burn a giant Wicker Man effigy, and that's been going for about 100 years. But we'll come back to some of the origins of the Wicker Man in a few slides. But what's interesting, this story incorporates a couple of elements. One of the elements is that the Burning Man symbolizes Larry Harvey's ex-girlfriend. And that's the story that we just heard him tell himself in the clips. It was the official story for quite a while. Then it became the unofficial story, and then it became denied. And now it's turned into, it's just rumor. But to me, this is looking more and more like a cover story. Let me read out the other article here, which is from the Black Rock Beacon, which is a free newspaper handed out at Burning Man. Burners you should know, Flash Hopkins. The way Flash tells the story, the first Burning Man was a woman. Don't burn your ex-wife's effigy in front of her house, he told lovelorn Larry. The naughty lady went down to Baker Beach instead, set up at Water's Edge. It was 1986 this time. A local coven was having a midsummer ceremony and shared their lewd pastries with those first burners. Flash remembers cookies with strawberry nipples being pressed to his lips. Right. So now we've got another element now, which is that when they went to the beach, bringing their effigy to burners, there was already a local coven there. They just randomly encountered a local coven hanging out on the beach in the solstice, right? But in this telling of events, it's sort of, you get the impression Flash didn't know any of them. The first version of events, he talks about this lady, Mary Grauberger. Now, one of the people I've been able to interview in my research is a lady called Janet Law, and she dated Larry Harvey for 7 years. When he first moved to San Francisco from Oregon, he was living with her. And when the two of them split up, she went to live with this lady named Mary Grauberger, who's an artist. And Larry went to live with a guy called Dan Miller, who's the constructor of the Burning Man in future years. Actually, Dan Miller is interesting as well. I have another source that knows his brother, who very distinctly remembers being invited to a Burning Man party in San Francisco in 1985 by Dan Miller's brother. But Dan Miller, Larry's roommate, is another figure that actually doesn't appear officially at the first Burning Man in many of the stories of it. So the cast of characters is changing. But when I asked Janet about Mary Grauberger, Mary refused to directly do an interview with me because of her experience with the previous Burning Man book, which said that she was down on the beach making these effigies and burning them, and she decided to stop doing it for some reason, and Larry Harvey just decided to take it over. Now, Janet, who's a good friend of Mary and lived with her, did confirm this with Mary and sent me the email that she absolutely did not burn an effigy of a Wicker Man on the solstice in Baker Beach in 85 or 86. And what she would do is she would go and she would collect driftwood from the beach, and she would make statues on the water's edge. And as the water would come in, it would wash the driftwood away, which when you think about it, that is a much more feminine kind of approach probably than soaking a big bonfire with gasoline and watching it go up. But she says that she wasn't involved in this Burning Man at all, and Larry might have shown up at a couple of those things on the beach one time when she was doing it, but fire wasn't really their thing. It was more water. So,
well, you know, just to interject there, in a bone fire.
Right.
Okay.
Let me just finish up with a couple of things on here, and I really do want to delve into the influences of the different movements that fed into Burning Man in a bit more detail in a future episode. But yeah, so we've got the wooden art on Baker Beach. That was being done by Mary Grauberger. Having fires on Baker Beach. When Larry was dating Janet Lohr, she would teach ceramics at an art school, and she would go down to Baker Beach, and the students would dig holes and build fires, and they would fire the pottery on the beach. So Larry was aware that this was a place where you're allowed to have an open fire on the beach, from dating this girl that did pottery classes there. Baker Beach was also a nude beach, and they had Burning Man on the northern nude end of Baker Beach. The concept of burning a human figure is from the Wicker Man movie. It's actually a druidic practice described by Caesar in 55 BC. The Golden Bough book features this as well. Moving the event out to the playa, the Cacophony Society seemed to claim credit for that. It's also a guy called William Binzen that was doing art out by where Burning Man happens now in the desert, called Desert Sightworks. And he basically pioneered camping and a festival that's all about art. Like you can live inside an art festival. That came from him, and many of the elements of Burning Man seem to have been co-opted from what was at that festival and brought into their own one. But also there was a lot of the same people attending both festivals. Burning Man has 10 principles, and one of them is leave no trace. This is actually a principle of the Boy Scouts. Last week we mentioned the Army's top Satanist, Colonel Michael Aquino, who he was the national commander of the Eagle Scout Honor Society. So there's a very, very tenuous link between Boy Scouts and Satanism right there. Certainly the leave no trace principle came out of the Boy Scouts. And then the fusion of the art and fire and technology and big kind of mechanically structured art. There's an art group called Survival Research Labs that sort of was feeding that bit into it as well. But moving on now. So why does 85 and 86, why there's so many different stories? Why does someone say there was a coven and then others say there's no mention of a coven? You know, why there were basically eight people in the official version of events? But in the official version of events in 1986, there were 8 people, which was Larry Harvey, Jerry James, who grew up on Air Force bases, and their two kids. So that's 4 of them. And then there's 4 other people. Now, if this guy flashes here, he's been to every Burning Man, I believe. He's one of Larry's oldest friends. They probably would remember, and Larry would remember and put him in the official story. Flash puts himself there, Larry doesn't. I don't know. But let's say there's 5. So there's 3 more people. Maybe it's Dan Miller. There's still 2 people in the official version of events that we have no idea who those people were at the first Burning Man. And in all the various accounts of it, can't name it. And you think, something this important with only 2 people after 30 years, you'd be able to figure out who wasn't there with you. So there's a lot of mysterious stuff, and then the stuff about there was a coven doing a ritual, but it wasn't theirs, and there was Wicker Man being burned at the beach, but it wasn't theirs. Well, sure enough, now we change slides. Here's the story of the real first Burning Man, and this is something put on by a guy called Timothy O'Neill, and his partner, Linda Lamb. They're also working with an artist called Christine Ambrosia. And what we see here is we can kind of trace, if you want to find the bridge between the counterculture of the 60s at LSD and the counterculture, cyberculture of the 21st century and Burning Man and LSD, what happened to LSD in the 70s and up until sort of the mid-80s. Well, what it looks like to me is that it went very, very much underground, and it sort of emerged a little bit in the punk scene. And then as the punk scene merged into this industrial scene, we saw this fusion of magic and the coming forward of the gay movement, together with the evolution of, in the beginning of punk, it was all anarchy and fuck the queen and things like that. But yeah, as the industrial movement and Nine Inch Nails and things like that came out, it was more moving towards the fusion and harmony of the technology age, and the jarring juxtaposition, if you like, of electronic elements with music and things like that. But you think of the imagery of the industrial scene, it's very dark, very gothic, very bondage and leather oriented, a lot of black and white stuff, and elements of fire and flamethrowers. And also elements of LSD, and then we see as well converging here the ritual magic, the concept that dressing in costumes, affecting the lighting, and everyone performing their part in a structured, choreographed ritual that actually is a magical ceremony. That's creating magic, wishing for things, imposing your will on the world, and so. Timothy O'Neill, I've been in touch with him a little bit, and I'm hoping to get a more detailed interview. But he goes by the name of Elder Mech, and he's an esoteric scholar. So he did a fine art degree from UC Berkeley in the 60s, and he was a senior writer for a magazine called Gnosis that covered all kinds of esoteric topics. And he was very interested in the Holy Grail King Arthur stories by Geoffrey Ashe. Geoffrey Ashe lives in Glastonbury Tor, and he took over Dion Fortune's house. Dion Fortune was a witch that during World War II conducted large-scale magical ceremonies all across Great Britain, trying to defeat the occult magic of the Nazis. So he was following the Grail stories, interested in the Wicker Man, had seen the Wicker Man movie, and you can see here that the solar magic event is a flyer from one of their rituals where the Wicker Man depicted in the drawing is very similar to the Wicker Man from the 1973 movie, which is all about a satanic cult infecting a small village in the English countryside.
Actually, on an island.
On an island. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm not one.
And the Mary Grauberger, who, although she denies involvement specifically with Larry Harvey and the Wicker Man rituals, it does seem to me that she was interacting with these people. The people that I've spoken to in this scene that are giving me information, they all know her and were aware of her and her art. And she was on the board of directors of the Unity Foundation. And they are interesting for a couple of reasons. One is in 1977, they put on the first ever Gay Pride March in San Francisco, and 250,000 people came. I think we've already told the story of Stuart Brand putting on the Trips Festival at the Longshoremen's Hall, and all of the hippies of the day couldn't believe there were 5,000 other freaks. They all emerged from the forest and everyone looked at each other. Well, imagine the effect of 250,000 gay people marching in the street, or gay and straight supporters of them. This was a huge turning point, and in some ways a birthing point of the LGBT movement. And so that was coming out of San Francisco. And when you go into San Francisco, into Castro Street, into the central part of the gay scene, there is a lot of leather. There is bondage. All of these elements, and there's heavy drug use in the gay scene. And this industrial music, the clubs that it was coming out of in San Francisco, it's very, very much conversion in a small area. But the Unity Foundation didn't just do the gay parades. They also created things called the digital be-in. And this was a very deliberate attempt to take what Timothy Leary et al. Had done with the human be-in in Golden Gate Park in the 60s in the Summer of Love, and recreate that for the digital age. And so they had at least 16 of these digital be-ins. They may even still be going today. But basically the launch of this was Macworld in 1988. So when Apple did their Macworld event, they said, we're going to now have these annual digital be-ins. And they brought together all countercultural figures, such as Timothy Leary and John Perry Barlow, to be the ringleaders of this new world. And so this is the link that we talked about earlier between marketing the personal computer as a tool of freedom and the counterculture hippies and figures and heroes that were behind it. So it's very interesting that, again, around the time of the launch of the World Wide Web, we have the birth of Burning Man, the Cacophony Society, but then we have the launch as well of these digital be-ins, and Timothy Leary himself promoting LSD, cyberspace,
We've got Tim Leary, Ken Kesey, Ram Dass, Wavy Gravy, all right there, who were all part of the original Human Beings up in the Bay Area as well. Let me ask you a quick question, Steve. Did you happen to try this phone number on the flyer to see if it was still active?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. This flyer I've been able to establish is from 1986 by the dates of the Saturday. Let me read you a couple of quotes. So the first one's from Timothy O'Neill himself, and he's saying that they did these down on Ocean Beach, not Baker Beach, and they started before 1985, and we did them for a couple of years consecutive. Christine Ambrosia and I started doing performance art in 1978 and worked until about 1986. There were a total of 50 performances. There were 2 guys from Survival Research Labs at one of the performances. Now, these performances, we'll talk a little bit more about them in a second, but what they're doing is they're combining dance, ritual, and the occult with industrial music. That's as much as Christina Ambrosia, she's a lycanthropic performing artist. So that means she's a werewolf, right?
Exactly.
And they're very into this magical energy called the Black Sun, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and linked up with a band called Coil. Linda Lamb or Lamé, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that she was Timothy O'Neill's production partner, and she was the art teacher at the Fort Ord military base for 3 years. So basically, she went straight out of Fort Ord, as far as I can tell, into helping Timothy and Christine put together these occult ritual performances, combining all of those elements. She was also commissioned to paint the Masonic Temple in San Francisco and an ancient monastery in Italy. So it seems like moving in these occult circles can lead to some interesting work for artists. And then the other guy who I really have to thank is Max Valerio for coming out and sharing some of this information with me. Max was one of the first female to male transgenders, and he's written a book about the experience called The Testosterone Files, which does briefly touch on this first Burning Man with Timothy. He says Timothy's a musician, painter, an esoteric but not academic scholar. He wrote for Gnosis magazine for many years. He did indeed dream up the idea for Burning Man in the mid-'80s and initiated the whole process. We thought of it then as burning a wicker man at the beach, which is what we did. We all put a wish in the wicker man and it was burned at the beach. Now, I'll just interrupt myself for a second to say this happens today, but Burning Man has a temple. So on Saturday night, they burn the effigy. On Sunday night, they burn the temple. And Burning Man goes for eight days now. But when it used to go for a weekend, on Sunday night, they'd burn the man. That was it. When they brought in this concept of a temple, I believe it was 2001, almost straight away what happened is people started going to the temple and writing messages and attaching it to the temple to burn with the temple. So there's a kind of a link between that behavior to these people putting a wish in the wicker man. But the difference is they're doing magic wanting to create something. That's the purpose of magic. Whereas the temple at Burning Man is more like wanting to capture the magic and energy of sorrow and concentrate the release of that energy, in my opinion. Just coming back to finish reading these quotes here. So this is from Max Valerio. The idea for the ritual came from Timothy's research into Druid practices and traditional British practices as relating to the early Grail kings. He thinks the original source was Geoffrey Ashe, the British historian. That was where he read of this ritual and decided to reenact it as a performance on the beach. There was a connection there possibly with Survival Research Labs people, which may have morphed into what we now know as Burning Man. The idea of ritual as performance, of live energies unleashed by ritual elements, both from medieval or ancient mythologies, and mixed with elements from BDSM or avant-garde and or surrealistic art practices, was the heart of what Tim was exploring with Christine Ambrosia in the 70s and 80s. So Burning Man has come out of this post-punk industrial chaos magic scene. Which brings me to the next slide. So here's from Timothy O'Neill's biography page, Gnosis magazine, 10 years. And he's contributed to a whole bunch of other publications as well. Some interesting ones here. One is Apocalypse Culture. Burning Man has always been marketed as post-apocalyptic. So it's interesting that the guy doing the first events is writing to this Apocalypse Culture magazine. There's also this one here, Secreted, Suppressed by Jim Keith. Jim Keith is a conspiracy author. He wrote about black helicopters across America, and he died at Burning Man, quite mysteriously. He fell off a stage and then died of a blood clot to the lung, I believe. The other publication here that Timothy O'Neill was contributing to, the Fenris Wolf, have a look at this cover here, and we see Anton LaVey, Kenneth Anger, Jane Mansfield. That's all Church of Satan. William S. Burroughs, famous gay icon, beat poet, counterculture.
CIA agent, MK Ultra, Greenwich Village team, CIA assassin, etc.
Yeah, and I've highlighted so at the top here some of the article topics that are in this Fenris Wolf. This is from issue 2, but Beyond the Valley of Acid by Genesis Porridge of Psychic TV, In Defense of Satanism, Anton LaVey, The Horns of Dilemma, The Satan Game. This isn't just magic. This is Satanism, black magic, occult, ritual. As we explored last week, Satanism isn't necessarily worshipping the god of Lucifer. It's really any form of this that's going against the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic religions.
Well, or anything that's attacking the sacredness of the family and the husband and wife and the creation of life, essentially.
Right. And even taking the tools of the creation of life upon themselves and becoming gods in the process. And Timothy, from his LinkedIn page, he says, my ultimate goal is to preserve and propagate new visions of the Western esoteric and Gnostic tradition through the agencies of the historic orders that embody the wisdom, such as the Rose Cross, Freemasonry, and the Perfectibilists. Now, the Perfectibilists is another name for the Illuminati. It's actually an excellent book on the Illuminati called Perfectibilists. And you see here, he's a member of Yogoda Satsanga, that's autobiography of a yogi, traditional Martist order, and the ancient mystical order Rosecrans. So he's a Rosicrucian, probably a Freemason, very probably an Illuminati. And as we'll see as we look more and more into the origins and concepts of Burning Man, it isn't one or two people that link it to the Illuminati. The links just keep coming up again and again and again. But here we have the person that first started doing Wicker Man events on the beach on San Francisco on the solstice, saying that his ultimate goal is to, bring about the new Dark Ages and the traditions of the Illuminati.
And we've been exposing this whole agenda for the new Dark Age here on Gnostic Media for the last several years.
Absolutely. So we're moving on to this group called Psychic TV that I just want to mention briefly. And, maybe if anybody watching this knows more about this group and their connections into the military intelligence community, you can let us know in the comments. But it's quite a strange group and individual, this guy, Genesis Porridge, behind Psychic TV. This flyer here, I don't know if you can read it, but it says, tune in, turn on the Acid House. So this band is considered one of the foundational groups in Acid House music that basically, started out in the UK and became very big out of the UK around the world. And it came and hit, it was present in America, but as a very underground thing. And then it sort of had a rebirth in this country as EDM, electronic dance music, sort of in about 2004, 2005 seems to be the resurgence of that movement. But basically this Acid House is springing from the links between San Francisco and London. I also want to highlight on this slide here, over on the right, the black and white Psychic TV EP cover or whatever it is. You notice the skull, and it has the little symbol in the forehead as well. Very reminiscent of the Grateful Dead logo. Sort of like this is the evolution of Deadheads for the new technological era. I also want to read out a quote here. So this is from Timothy O'Neill, and he's writing about what this scene was basically like in this era. Most of the artists associated with industrialism had long-standing interests in the occult sciences. However, the industrial music milieu was savagely opposed to any expression of otherworldly interests. Finally, about 1981, the dam broke. Psychic TV came out with their first album, Force the Hand of Chance, which contained direct references to Aleister Crowley and the practice of magic. One song on the album was even intended to be used as background for a guided path working. Right? So they to play this music while you do your magic. The long-suppressed interest in the magical that had functioned for most of these artists could now safely come to the surface. Almost overnight, a whole movement of post-industrial music oriented toward ritual and magic sprang up. In a very real sense, this could be seen as a logical extension of the industrial fascination with death taken to its extreme limit. Entry to the land of the dead, the former planes, via the magical path. The post-industrialists found in magic, and particularly Crowley's conception of magic with a K, both a powerful image for the invocation of long-forgotten and suppressed forces within Western culture, and a doorway into perspectives not bound by rational constraint. I mean, there's more, but I think that gives the gist of it.
Let me just say here, I did a little bit of research into Genesis P. Orridge back in March, and his biggest influences are William S. Burroughs and Brian Geisen. Of course, we just mentioned William S. Burroughs, CIA agent working with MK Ultra in Greenwich Village, famous author. Brian Geisen, another Satanist. Now, he was also associated with Anton LaVey, Douglas Rushkoff, Jason Louv, John Perry Barlow, who, of course, is from the Grateful Dead and Burning Man, Kenneth Anger, who, of course, is another well-known Satanist, Peter Lamborn Wilson, who we haven't mentioned for a few minutes, who created the Autonomous Zone. Terrence McKenna, of course, shows up here. He was also part of Current 93, and he coined the term pandrogyny. And he's also the author of the Psychic Bible.
Right. And, the whole pandrogyny angle, we can trace it back to this Urania movement that sort of emerged in the late 1800s in England. And, they're very much tied in with the occult, with theosophy, with all these guys. And Oscar Wilde was part of it. We're getting a little bit off topic with that, but I see in this group here in the mid 80s an extension of all of those earlier currents. Absolutely, Crowley. They're very explicit about we're following in Crowley to the point of like they're putting music for his freaking spells to be cast, and all of those connections that you mentioned. Here's this group. They were there in the 60s making the Human Being. They're there in the 80s making the Digital Being. They're there in the 90s making Burning Man. It's not even that they work for Stanford or SRI. It's the same dudes.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, the connections between this group and Crowley go even deeper than this. So, moving on to slide 8. So, on the North Solstice in 1985, when possibly Larry Harvey was at Baker Beach burning a man, possibly not, who knows with all the holes in that story, but we know this thing for sure, that Timothy O'Neill's friend and performing partner Christine Ambrosia has teamed up with a guy called John Balance from the band Coil, and they are doing a magical ceremony simultaneously in both London and San Francisco, linking them together, and this ceremony is called the Invocation of the Black Sun. Now, in the last episode about Satanism, where we talked about Michael Aquino, we talked about he'd gone to Wewelsburg Castle in Germany, which was the home of Heinrich Himmler's occult black magic chamber. Well, that's actually the chamber of the Black Sun is that chamber, and I've got an image of it there with the Black Sun symbol that's embedded in the floor. It's sort of a very advanced version of the swastika, if you like.
On this altar is one of a number of daggers which we may use in our rituals. This one happened to belong to the commanding general of the most elite unit of Germany's infamous SS, which was concerned with black magic and occultism research in general. Anything that it could find that had to do with the origins of the human race, destiny of humanity.
The perverted view of the occult held by Heinrich Himmler was of an evil magic that could help create a new master race. Wewelsburg Castle is where he performed his ceremonies.
I have been to the Wewelsburg, which still preserves Heinrich Himmler's ritual chambers to this day. and have conducted a black magical ritual in the so-called Hall of the Dead beneath the Wewelsburg.
And so Michael Aquino has gone to, while seconded on NATO, Himmler's chamber and done a magical ritual in the chamber of the Black Sun, opening the gateway to the laboratory of the soul. And then he comes back to the Presidio, and there in San Francisco, basically the next year, on the solstice, when Aquino likes to do his rituals as well, we see this other ritual going, and it's also a Black Sun ritual. But going even further than that, the presence in this ritual of the band Coil is highly significant, because I mentioned earlier that the leadership of the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, changed in 1985. It had been contested in court for a long time. A guy called Grady McMurtry, who officially had it, he passed away. And then the other contender to it passed away as well within about a month. And then this guy called William Breeze became the head of the OTO, which is the organization Crowley used to unite the various branches of theosophy and other occult groups within Freemasonry. It's basically the Illuminati's way to operate within Freemasonry, because anyone that likes initiation and secrets and mysteries, like a Freemason, well, they can then also be led into this other occult magical group, the OTO, and that's sort of how the Illuminati operates. So the head of this is a guy called William Breeze. I believe he lives in New York. And since this ritual, since the solstices of 1985, this guy has had unchallenged, unbroken leadership of the OTO, more than 30 years. And so in the ritual and the invocation of the Black Sun, this is Timothy O'Neill actually writing about it. And from what I can piece together, when they did these 50 performances, he and Christine, he would give a lecture, an esoteric lecture about a topic, and then the ritual performance would sort of begin. So on June 21st, the day of summer solstice, 1985, in London and San Francisco, two post-industrial artists, John Balance of Coil and Christine Ambrosia of Ambrosia Transpersonal Communications, embarked upon an ambitious and carefully planned simultaneous transcontinental ritual that combined music and art in an attempt to focus upon and use a specific etheric energy locked in the dark realms of the underworld. This was the symbol of Nigrido, the blackening and purging of the soul, toward the brighter lands of the white and red suns, the albedo and rubedo, or ultimate cleansing of the soul. Christine and John planned to collect the appropriate etheric energies and focus them through the lens of performance and ritual. The ultimate goal was to create a gateway or tunnel between etheric planes that could be used on an extended basis to enter and work with the energy of the Black Sun, both magically and artistically. The hope was that this powerful, purifying experience could be stepped down to the audience in such a way that any of them who wished to make use of that energy could do so safely and easily. So this is a real magic ritual. They're not messing around. And it just happens to be about opening a connection and a pathway to the gateway of the soul. Same thing as Michael Aquino's Black Sun ritual in Wewelsburg. The other interesting thing here is this word albedo. The word albedo is being used in the context of what they call global warming, global dimming, and the idea that the Earth is highly reflective. And one of the theories that was being touted in the Al Gore days, if you want to call them that, was that to prevent global warming, we need to change the albedo of the Earth to change the reflectivity of the Earth. And one way this can be done is if you paint the roof of your house white, it's actually incredibly energy efficient. For some reason, many house roofs are black. But in the science of geoengineering and many of the papers that have been published about high-level atmospheric aerosol spraying, the scientific purpose of doing this is actually to alter the albedo of the Earth. So it brings up the possibility that while they're weaving together these webs and nets electronically, sort of in the etheric plane, connecting all humans together in their net and in their web, they're also in the skies and atmosphere above us, spraying these intercollecting lines, altering the albedo of the Earth. Possibly that is part of a giant magical ritual across the whole planet. I don't know. I just raise that as an interesting coincidence of the use of that word albedo, which is not something that you run into that often. And then O'Neill, he seemed to think that the whole ritual was a success. The passage was opened, and the purifying light of the black sun, under the intense control of John and Christine, flamed out for the use of anyone who intuitively cared to use it. So the crew doing the first Burning Man, building the Wicker Man, doing the rituals, they're really into magic, they're really into the occult. They're doing this black sun ritual to open a gateway to the soul and to the realm of the dead, and channeling those energies, bringing it forth to the world for anyone who wants to use it. So we've now covered the true history of Burning Man. We can move on now to the unofficial history of Burning Man, as you will hear from the Burning Man organisation, although we're still going to go through a bits that they'd prefer you didn't hear. So if you can see that slide there, the foundations, we've got a picture in, I believe that this picture is 1986. It possibly may have been earlier. This is, as far as we know, the very, very first Burning Man figure. The first one we have a picture of anyway. And it's the image is from a movie, Dust and Illusions, produced by Mad Nomad Films. A really good unofficial movie about Burning Man. Now, we'll notice some things about this figure. First, it very distinctively has horns. And then the next thing is it's a little dark, but it has quite wide, flared hips. And it's resting its hands on its hips. And this is very indicative of Pan, the goat man figure. He's always depicted as a horned figure with wide, flared hips. So they've done this. And in this photograph, to me, it really looks like Ocean Beach. I can't say for sure. But it's probably a minor detail anyway. But certainly this is, as far as we know, this is the first man, the first goat man. Larry Harvey and Jerry James have brought their kids, and they actually made an effigy of a dog as well. So on the first ritual Burning Man, a dog was burned too. Now, that's kind of a strange thing. One of the reasons the dog possibly could be there is when you look at the tarot. And in the tarot deck, the first card 0, it's actually known as, is the Fool. And the Fool is almost always depicted with a dog. And interestingly, the second card is the Magician. So they play the Fool first, and then the Magician comes out. Also, I've included in the tarot cards on this slide some of the depictions of card 15, which is the Devil, and also Baphomet, which is the Elias Levy rendition, I think. And you notice that he's depicted as this horned figure. He has wide hips. He has furry, fawn-like legs. And very often has one hand raised in the air, which became a feature of later Burning Mans. The other potential reason for a dog to be there is back in the days of the Druids and the bonfire, the bone fire, or the bane fire. If someone crossed the Druids and was to be burned in the Wicker Man, they would burn all their possessions with them, which often included domestic animals. And people didn't really have cats as pets in the ancient Celtic days, but they definitely had dogs, chickens, possibly goats.
Well, they had cats. I mean, cats and dogs were working animals back then. They weren't something that you just had lounging around on the couch,
Yeah. So anyway, the kids are at the first one. The dog's being burned, and they do this ritual on the beach 4 times officially. And when they try to do it in 1990. And by then, it's attracted quite large crowds. In the official story of events, the Cacophony Society first showed up at Burning Man in 1988. But there was quite an acrimonious lawsuit involving the Burning Man founders in 2007. And the testimony from that lawsuit says that they first showed up there physically in 1989, although they were aware of it in 88. And so this is probably just a good general question about the Trivium Yarn. What do you think? Does court testimony from multiple witnesses sworn in, is that a more reliable source than a corporate website talking about themselves?
I would tend to say yes, because there's a writing agenda on having everything laid out in the sworn testimony in court.
Yeah, and I think that the corporate website, in the case of Burning Man, there's a huge number of contradictions. They contradict themselves. There's a lot of information that doesn't stack up. So on this one, I'm going to go with the historical factors. The Cacophony Society showed up at Burning Man in 1989, and when they came, they brought cameras with them to film, and then I believe even some news cameras from a local TV station may have shown up that year. So the following year in 1990, the event became very big, and there's a couple of thousand people supposedly went down there. The man was maybe 30 or 40 feet high at this point, and the cops showed up, I think the park police, and they were like, "Oh, you can't burn this thing here, this giant fire with this crowd." And there was some argy-bargy with Larry Harvey saying, well, and John Law, his other co-founder, that there's going to be a riot. Look at these people; they demand something. And eventually, in the official story of events, Larry Harvey decided at that moment that he would be about civic responsibility and not anarchy and mayhem. And so they're like, "Yes, officer, we won't burn it." They dismantled it later. They took the wood to a parking lot where it was mysteriously and accidentally chopped up and then lost. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if that Burning Man figure was taken somewhere else, maybe even to Bohemian Grove, and was burned in private. But the official story is it was just destroyed and it was lost. And then after that, they were forced to move Burning Man out to the desert.
Sure. Now, I just wanted to add a couple of things. I don't know how much you traced out on the Cacophony Society. Of course, it came out of the Suicide Society, which was very similar to what the Merry Pranksters were doing. And Cacophony Society was also related to this temporary autonomous zone that we saw from Peter Lamborn Wilson. But it's apparently Discordianism, which order out of chaos, and formed by Robert Anton Wilson and Kerry Thornley.
Yeah, well, I'd like to actually come back and maybe we'll do an entire episode looking at these and other societies and how they all came together to form Burning Man. But it's certainly all of these influences are very, very strong and shouldn't be dismissed. Burning Man wasn't just an idea that Larry Harvey had one day that accidentally turned out to be big, not by any means.
Right.
Just to wrap up on this slide, so Burning Man, when it went out to the desert, there was sort of some moves happened to make an LLC, make it a little bit corporate, but it formally became BlackRock City LLC in 1997, and that's when the 6 founders, the official founders today, they became partners in this LLC. And the original LLC was structured as a tontine, which is a very, very obscure corporate structure. You know, when I first heard of it, I had to do some research on it, and I have a degree in business and, I have been involved with the founding of hundreds of companies. And I'd never heard of this before, but as it turns out, a tontine was a structure that they came up with to finance the British East India Company. So it was the days when the Navy was actually privateers. So merchants would get together, fund a ship, the captain would go out, and the spoils would be split between the investors and the captain. But by the time the ship returned from the voyage, the captain might not be alive, the investors might not be involved, they could be passed away. Who gets the money? So this tontine structure is a last man standing type structure, so that if everyone dies, there'll still be somebody there to run it. And it seems to extremely favor the youngest member of the group, which is Burning Man's CEO, Marion Goodell, who's at least 20 years younger than the rest of them. The other interesting thing about this tontine structure is that's how they built the buildings for the Grand Lodge of Freemasonry, also known as UGLY, the United Grand Lodge of England. But this building in London, it's a spectacular building, and the whole hall, the tavern, everything like that was financed with this tontine structure. So I don't know any other dance party, arts festival, anything in the world that would have this military, naval-based corporate structure. It's very, very arcane and obscure. And then so from 2011, Burning Man has gone through another change. And so now it's become a non-profit. And basically, the original founders donated their shares of the LLC to Burning Man. They say that they got 2 different accountants to assess the value of the company. They chose the lowest value, and they gave them away at the lowest value to give themselves the lowest possible tax deduction. So not only did they want to make a selfless gift, in giving it, they wanted to also punish themselves by removing any ability to even claim like a tax deduction from the gift. I guess they could get something, but it's the lowest one. Now they would say that, well, that was prudent and their accountants advise them or whatever, but it's a very weird thing to create something as successful worldwide as Burning Man, and just when it's really hitting mainstream success of Oprah and Dr. Phil and everything like that, everyone involved to say, look, we give it away, we're not involved, we don't want any profit from it anymore. I mean, on the surface of it, it sounds very altruistic, but in fact, what we've been exposing at burners.me is when you read the fine print of some of these documents, what they've done isn't what they've said they've done, really. Like the assets of Burning Man are the trademark Burning Man, which they've had many, many lawsuits to protect, and the intellectual property, which includes rights to the art and movies and photographs and everything like that. So what the founders did is they transferred all this stuff to a private company for an unknown sum, and then they get paid a royalty from the non-profit every year for the use of these trademarks. And this is a very similar structure to the way the Church of Scientology runs itself. It has 5 or 6 different companies, and they license things to each other, and there's travel expenses and legal and accounting and rent costs are cross-charged across everything in the group. When you go through the official 501c3 public statements of these companies, it becomes quite a messy web to untangle exactly what's going on. Again, a very, very unusual structure for a rave to have.
Indeed.
So moving on to this horned goat man figure, and there's a couple of pictures here sort of showing that the evolution of the Burning Man figure. So at the top right is the first ever flyer that we have promoting Burning Man, and I've been able to establish that was in 1987 from the dates mentioned on it. It's probably pretty hard to read, but basically there's a quote at the top. It says, "The force that through the green fuse drives the flower drives my red blood, that blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer." And it's a very interesting quote because it's from a Dylan Thomas poem, and he's actually misquoting the Dylan Thomas. So there's a contradiction. Perhaps it's just an error. But the original poem says, "The force that through the green fuse drives the flower drives my green age." So he said, "Through the green fuse drives the flower drives my red blood." So is it a Freudian slip? Is it some satanic thing that they're trying to put red blood in there? I mean, red blood's mentioned in the poem, but that comes later. It also talks about a crooked rose, which is interesting because one of the 6 founders goes by the stage name Crimson Rose. We'll get to her a bit later on. And then in the rest of this poem, it talks about a hanging man, and it talks about the crooked worm in the lover's tomb. It's a pretty dark, kind of nasty, nihilist poem. It's a very strange poem to put on a flyer promoting your event. I've got no real theory as to why they did it. And then they're using the image of the stick figure man from probably 86, possibly 85. Now, interestingly, in this flyer, there's no mention at all of the words Burning Man. And in fact, we never see the words Burning Man until 1989. That's a point that I'd like to come back to later on. This image here, I believe, is from the Burning Man website, and I believe that this is Burning Man in 1988. You can see, I'm talking about at the bottom right of the screen. You can see the shape of the man has turned into a triangle. There's still 2 very distinct horns. He's got a bit of a pointy head, maybe a trapezoidal shape. A little bit hard to see from that, but there's still the internal skeleton is a spine, and there's wide flared hips at the bottom. And then I've also shown here the face of the Burning Man as it is today, and as it has been for probably 20 years plus. But you can see these elements that they're hidden away. They're a little harder to see and not as prominent, but they're still there. So there are still horns on the Burning Man figure today. The horned goat figure I'm showing you there, book God of the Witches by Margaret Murray, has been quite influential in Wicca, to the devil with the horns. This is not all peace and love that these people are doing. It's much closer to devil worship than peace and love. I mean, the horns are right there. This is a picture of when the Burning Man burns. This is from 2014, and I believe the man that year was about 125 feet high, the biggest one that ever made. It took about 2 hours to burn, and all the millennials, as their acid was kicking in, were getting a bit restless by the end of the 2 hours. So they took it down to a much faster burn again. But what happens is the man's arms go up in this power pose. It's known as the Apophis pose. And then fireworks come out of it and it burns to the ground. So this is the climactic moment of the whole ceremony. And this pose, the Apophis pose, that comes from Crowley. So Crowley has a specific set of different poses and rituals that you can do, all relating to Osiris and Isis. Of course, Set, with Michael Aquino's Temple of Set, he ties into that whole Osiris-Isis story as well. I think he was the son of them. And then Osiris is also one of the popular theme camps at Burning Man. And we see a lot of this Freemasonic Egyptian symbolism and mythology at Burning Man. There's a lot of pyramids. There's a lot of all-seeing eyes, sphinxes, Anubis. There's a picture here of the Burning Man statue on its base, and stepping between the two realms, and that's highly occult mythology as well. Crossing between the two worlds, as was the purpose of that 1985 Black Sun ritual. Here we have this is looking at Burning Man from the air, and I think in the next episode maybe we'll look at some of the specifics of Burning Man in the desert, what it looks like, how big it is, everything like that. But the immediate thing that you notice is the whole thing takes place inside a pentagon. I mean, could it be much more obvious than that? The Pentagon itself is the world's largest office building, 6.5 million square feet. It takes up 29 acres, and the walls are 921 feet long. From the middle to the edge of it is 0.3 of a mile. Black Rock City, the world's largest rave, and I say that in terms of ground area, although there are others that have more people. It takes up 3,650 acres. That's the area inside the Pentagon. There's actually an excluded zone of about 15,000 acres of desert where they have it. The sides of it are 9,600 feet long, and from the center to the edge is 1.5 miles. So this is a ginormous city. And you'll notice that someone on the internet here has kindly overlaid Black Rock City on top of the dimensions of the Pentagon, and the circle in the middle seems to match up perfectly. And I think the most likely reason for that is on the next slide. And this is my sort of crude drawings. I'm no graphic wizard, but the Black Rock City is oriented a 45-degree angle towards the sun, so that when the sun rises, he appears between the legs of the Burning Man effigy symbol. So turning that image around to be vertical, and then drawing in, connecting the inside of each of the vertices of the pentagon to another, you get a pentagram. And the first pentagram that's driven in red, it perfectly describes the dimensions of Black Rock City. So the layout of this thing, it's 0.666% of a circle, 2/3 of a circle, and it seems to go on the inner and outer edges of that horseshoe shape. That seems to be drawn by the Pentagon boundary lines. Also, the center camp area of Burning Man seems to be defined and drawn by the boundary lines of the Pentagon. And one of the things about this pentagram is, okay, it's tilted 45 degrees to begin with, so it could go either way. But looking at it from this view, it has the 2 points going downwards and the 1 point going upwards. Now, in Wicca magic, this is considered a good pentagram associated with white magic. The bad pentagram is the pink one in the middle that has the 2 horns upwards and the 1 lower. And the bad pentagram's drawn on the inside of the good pentagram. Now, that's actually recursive ad infinitum, but for those that say, well, the Burning Man, if it is happening in a pentagram, it's a good pentagram. Not really, because the circle where the actual burn's happening, what they call the inner plier, the Burning Man's in the bad pentagram in that one. The other fascinating thing I found in this research is in the bottom left corner there, you see this picture of the Villa Farnese in Caparola, Italy. The Farnese are one of the Venetian black nobility banking families. They're mentioned in the TV show The Borgias when the Vatican Bank, the Institute of Religious Studies, first gets set up. They bring in this young, goofy kind of guy to do the books, to run the 2 sets of books for the Pope, and that young, goofy guy is the Farnese. They went on to become an unbelievably wealthy and powerful family, and in this castle that they have that is shaped exactly like the Pentagon, the Jesuit order was actually funded. And apparently, if you go to this villa and look around inside it, there's a whole bunch, there's tons of occult symbols and rituals, and they proudly admit to controlling Washington, D.C., and that the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Was based on this one, which was the original prototype for it. Now, I haven't been to this villa to verify that for myself. I'm just going from what's written on the web about it. But isn't it fascinating that here's this Pentagon shape that's kind of only in three structures in Earth: the Pentagon in Washington, this Villa Farnese where the Jesuit order was funded, and Burning Man where Black Rock City takes place in it. Other than that, we don't really see the motif in architecture. The other thing that I was just recently in Amsterdam, and Amsterdam itself, it was the world's first centrally planned city. They basically created, they raised what was already there and created an artificial space with canals, and it looks very, very much like this layout of Black Rock City. This seems to be based on the designs of Bauhaus that we talked about earlier, where everyone lives in their own little block, their own little proportions. They meet in common areas and plazas and wide streets in the middle, but within their own space, they're free to decorate it however they will. And then the Black Rock City itself, it's laid out sort of like the hours of a clock. So starting at the top right, we have 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. In the middle is 6 or 6:30, and then it goes round as far as 10 o'clock. And then from the inner rings to the outer, the first one is known as the Esplanade, and then it goes A, B, C, D, and so on. And so every year when they have a different theme of Burning Man, that affects the structure of what the effigy looks like in the middle and the names of these roads, what the A stands for and the B and so on. And Larry Harvey, the Burning Man founder, officially that's his role to create the theme. So other artists design it, and then they pick the names of these streets. Other than that, everything in Burning Man is created by the burners themselves. But the idea, I guess, is that whatever the theme is for that year, the burners will try to create art that somehow relates to that theme. Now, another way of looking at this, this is from a website, Secrets in Plain Sight. And this particular page about Burning Man has actually been removed from the internet now. And whenever in my research I find a page that's been taken from the internet that relates to my occult research, I get very, very interested because there's a lot of good stuff. And why does this stuff get taken down if it's really, really good? This is an area I don't know much about. I don't know if you know more about the Kabbalah, Jan.
Oh, I couldn't tell you about this here. I did interview Scott Onstadt years ago, who runs Secrets in Plain Sight, though.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it's a great website, and he looks at the occult symbology in geography and architecture and things like that. So the Yetzirah is known as a world of formation in the Kabbalah. It seems to me that that's what Burning Man's about: envisioning new modes of human interaction, a laboratory of culture, a world in formation. And that sort of is the official line of what Burning Man's all about. This quote here is from your buddy, Daniel Pinchbeck.
Yeah. The guy who's publicly slandered me and published hit piece articles against me and all. Just to be clear, Daniel Pinchbeck's mother is Joyce Glassman of the Greenwich Village MK Ultra team. She was lovers with Jack Kerouac, lived with, we haven't mentioned his name for a few minutes, William S. Burroughs, and Allen Ginsberg, of course, who is another big CIA MK Ultra person.
Yeah, so,
and I should mention that Joyce Glassman is one of the ones who peddled feminism as well.
So my understanding is that Pinchbeck had Burroughs and Ginsberg and those guys that just drop around the house all the time for tea or whatever. Yeah. And then he grows up to be a promoter of
the exact and not only that, but William Burroughs is one of the first to promote the Mayan calendar, which he talked about in a French magazine article from like 1956. And then Daniel Pinchbeck, of course, Michael Coe, Yale professor Michael Coe, who's also a CIA agent, created the Mayan calendar into the world theme, and then Daniel Pinchbeck became the poster boy for that.
Right. Well, he's a big time burner, although recently he's actually he had quite a famous article last year saying why I'm not going to Burning Man, where he's now objecting to the environmental destruction of Burning Man, which I'm actually with him on that. This thing's got to such a scale now. It's generating such a massive amount of pollution, and they've lost sight of some of their original goals through that. But, here's an earlier quote he did in his book called The Return of Quetzalcoatl, which is around about this whole 2012 stuff. I considered Burning Man to be a fulcrum for the evolution of consciousness on the planet, where cutting-edge scientists consorted with neo-pagan warlocks, and arcane bits of knowledge were exchanged at hyperspeed. But it was also a carnal carnival, an evanescent parade of erotic possibility. Nakedness, body painting, bizarre costumes, patterns of piercings, and every form of extreme self-modification became commonplace sights after a few hours at the gathering. As a laboratory of the contemporary freakster psyche, the gathering was not all sweetness and light. And so here we have these same themes coming up again, these neo-pagan warlocks at cutting edge, light speed, coming up with the future of civilization. This is the same as the description of Burning Man from Jim Channon that I read out in an earlier episode. And then saying that it's a carnal carnival, as we heard last time about the Church of Satan, that's what they're all about, carnality. Live your life through carnality. In preference to anything else. And it's a laboratory for carnality. Certainly, whatever kind of kink you have is probably going on there somewhere at Burning Man.
And certainly Playboy is written up on Daniel Pinchbeck's kinky stuff.
Yeah, he's quite notorious for polyamory and things like that.
Yeah.
So this picture here is Burning Man in 1998. So basically, in '96, they had their Helco year, which we'll get into in a second, and then they went to private land for the first time, a place called Hualapai Flats, and there's a ranch there called Fly Ranch, which Burning Man have just acquired to create a year-round philosophy center like Esalen. I'm calling it Flysalon. But they had the one-off year there, and they ran into some problems with building permits and things like that. They decided to go back to federal land, back to the Black Rock Desert, and they started to lay the city out in a semicircle. So that's the first time that this began. And the shape here of the semicircle, to me, it looks very much like the Bennu bird from Egyptian mythology. So the Bennu bird is very often depicted with its wings curved in this 2/3 of a circle shape, and also with the sun above its head. Let's remember the Egyptians are worshipping the sun god Ra. It's also a representation of the phoenix. And Burning Man has also been associated with the phoenix, the bird that rises from the fire, by the founder Crimson Rose. Let's play that clip.
Boy, what does the man represent? I think he represents all of us. He's the collector of all the imagination and all the energy, and he consumes it all year long so that he can literally burn up like a phoenix.
Okay, now let's looking on at some of the other logos that are kind of related to the Burning Man logo. In the middle at the top is the stylized version of the Burning Man symbol. And the top right, you see the logo for the Council for Secular Humanism. Who knew there was even such a council? But secular humanism is very, very much aligned with what Burning Man is all about. This is basically the unreligion that Michael Aquino talked about and that H.G. Wells talked about the New World Order needing, that the religion of no religion, which is a religion for the secular.
Well, I think it was, you can never go too far from a Huxley. I think it was Julian Huxley that created the humanist stuff, and yeah, I see that tie into him. Journal of Humanistic Psychology, that goes right into all the same people we're always talking about.
Yeah, right. So we have the logo here. This one is the Burning Man Temple Guardians. We're showing the integration of the Burning Man symbol with the wings, with the winged bird. At the bottom right there, we have, this is a plaque at the entrance to the Presidio and SF, and it's showing the winged bird again. The wings are in the Bennu bird style, 2/3 of a circle position, and it's carrying a wreath of, I believe, laurel and a flaming torch in its claws. And the flaming torch is a symbol of psychological operations. We see it on the logo of the 7th Psychological Operations Group. We also see it on the logo of the 312th Military Intelligence Battalion, which, what do you know, is almost identical to the Grateful Dead logo with the skull, the lightning bolts, and the red and the blue. So the flaming torch is a symbol of propaganda, psyops, military intelligence. The Bennu bird, the symbol of the phoenix. You'll see here the Black Rock Ranger symbol as well, where in this case the arms of the man sweep around in this half circle thing. So that's actually from Wicca. And one of the most powerful symbols in Wicca is this one of the waxing and waning moon together with the full moon. So you have the two crescents of the moon on either side making a shape, and then the full circle in the center. And in drawing the stylized Burning Man symbol, you kind of make those left and right circle shapes, and you put the circle in the middle. Also, that Ranger logo where the man's arms are joined in the semicircle, that's straight from Wicca as well. That's a common depiction and a stylized way of incorporating those two moon elements with the Wicca goddess symbol. The Wicca goddess symbol is pictured with her arms raised. There's like a witch doing the arms raised. There's a crop circle of it. And the Burning Man, he loves to have his arms raised as well. And then in the Wicca runes and symbology, this is actually a symbol from God. For God, the circle with the horns on top of it, because their God is the horned God. Moving on now to some of the flyers promoting this, and this is the very first flyer from the Cacophony Society promoting the first zone trip to the desert for Burning Man in 1990. And you see it at the top of the flyer under the word burning is the symbol of the winged sun disk, which is a very common occult symbol, and we'll get onto that in a moment. I want to also point out a couple of things related to this promotion of Burning Man in 1990, where we start to add up a lot of the contradictions in the official stories of Burning Man. One of them is that it says the zone activities will include a group ritual requiring your participation to raise and immolate the Burning Man. So it's been called the Burning Man by 1990. But this is the first thing they list. We're going out here to do a group ritual. And the second aspect of that, it requires their participation. And when I first went to Burning Man in 1998, that was very much what it was about. No spectators. There are no spectators. Just by being there, you are a participant. Everyone is sort of required and expected to participate. And this shows that concept was there from the very, very beginning. They're going out to the desert to do a ritual. It's right there in black and white. The next thing is it says, sponsored by the Cacophony Society. And I highlight this as a contradiction because there are three different spellings of cacophony. And certainly two of them are in this page. It might even be all three. But there's cacophony, cacophony, and cacophony. So the mere fact that they spell their own society three different types, three different ways, perhaps that's a Discordian element. Come back and touch on that later. That's one contradiction. Another contradiction is it says on this flyer, sponsored by the Cacophony Society, Burning Man Committee, and the Black Rock Desert Zone Rangers. Also in this green one, which is the official organ of the Cacophony Society called Rough Draft, highlighted in blue on the green flyer, it also says the Black Rock Desert Rangers. So they're called the Black Rock Desert Rangers or the Black Rock Desert Zone Rangers. But from the very, very first Burning Man in the desert, they had these desert rangers there. Now, this guy here, Michael, pictured at the bottom left, he's one of the official founders. He's the second one of the founders at Burning Man. So he shows up, he says here 88, court testimony says 89, and he says he founded Burning Man's Rangers in 1992. He was the first one. Well, this proves that is absolutely not true because the Rangers are mentioned in two flyers in 1990. So we have some contradictions there, and this guy is absolutely full of contradictions, as we'll see a bit later on.
And opinions are not like assholes. When there's a contradiction that's a sign of a liar and error, you don't just throw your hands up and you say, oh, I can't know the truth. Somebody's absolutely lying in all of this.
Yep,
so,
absolutely.
And did you already touch on the Merry Pranksters there?
Yes, so they're basically making themselves the merry pranksters for the next generation.
We are the merry pranksters.
Yeah,
so
we
again,
are the merry pranksters.
And
yeah.
I had mentioned the merry pranksters earlier from the Brain database, and I mean it's clear that the merry pranksters probably went into the Suicide Society and then became the Cacophony Society, and then that expands out into Burning Man.
Yep. And so there's also a picture that the guy with the fireman's outfit, that's a guy called Dave Warner, and he's actually from the Suicide Club. He was a fire eater. He was also like a circus performer, lion tamer type of guy, like Anton LaVey, and he would light the man on fire, breathing the fire from his mouth. He's an ex-Marine. And then underneath him is a picture of this is one of the group rituals that required participation, which is the actual raising of the man. So in these days, they would pull the statue by ropes. Everyone there had to get involved pulling the ropes to lift the thing up, and it made it a real thing of physical effort. The participation wasn't just a magical ritual, it was a building and a constructing ritual as well. And as Burning Man got bigger, the people got a lot more distant from the man itself. It's now built by cranes. It takes months. During the week of Burning Man, you can't actually often get near to the base of the man because it's still under construction. And then finally, even when it burns now, you can't get particularly close to the fire. But back in these days, you were there building the man yourself. Looking at this winged sun disk symbol a little bit more, what do you know? It's the symbol of the Rosicrucian Order, the American Order of the Rosy Cross, which the guy behind the first Burning Man, Timothy O'Neill, is very much heavily involved in. So that may well explain why that symbol was on the first flyer going out to the Cacophony Society. We see this winged sun disk symbol appearing in a lot of places. There's a picture here of the Masonic Temple. I think it might be the Scottish Rite Masonic Temple in San Francisco, which is actually down at the Presidio as well. And they have the winged sun disk symbol on the top of it. The winged beetle, that's an amazing YouTube about the Beatles. I highly recommend people check that one out. The Temple of Set by Michael Aquino. He has this winged sun disk symbol and a pentagram on the front cover of his book. Also, this is the Crowley Tarot deck, which is known as the Thoth deck. The card for the Devil. It features a horned goat figure, and it also features the winged sun disk symbol. So the very, very first Burning Man, we have all this occult symbolism coming out. You want to say something?
What my research has shown on the wing symbol is it's as above, so below, with the serpent and the serpent below, the wings above, and then the sun and all of that sort of mythology.
Right.
Covered that in my first book, which I've discovered plenty of errors since figuring out this was all intelligence stuff.
So yeah, a very strong and popular common symbol within the world of the occult. So then moving on to the slide now about the occult theme. So when they began Burning Man, there wasn't a theme to it. The whole thing was a theme in itself. But they started to bring some of these organized theatrical elements into it. And the first thing it started off with was in 1984, out in the desert itself. They featured a grudge match of light versus darkness. It was Moses wrestling with the devil. So they bring the devil in. The very first time anything like a theme appears as the devil. And then they did a similar thing, a stage performance in 1995, and the theme behind that was good versus evil. So there we have evil there again. And, if they just came right out and said, our first theme is the devil, yeah, I mean, it's maybe a bit too obvious. Then the second theme is the devil, maybe a bit too obvious. But by 1996, when Burning Man decided we are going to have an annual theme for this event, that the actual first theme, it really was the devil. The first theme of Burning Man was Helco, the Inferno. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later as well. They followed that up in 97 with the theme of fertility, and this was repeated again in 2012 with Fertility 2.0. In 1998, the theme was the nebulous entity, and this is really quite interesting because 1998 was when Google famously launched at Burning Man. So the story of that is that Google was only ever a blank page with a text box for search on it. And today, or I guess now you see the ads a lot, but you can still go to google.com and you see that blank text box come up, but you have the logo above it, and they changed that artistically. That's known as the Google Doodle. The first ever Google Doodle was the Burning Man logo, and they got offered all of this money to incorporate as a company. They didn't even have a company. They didn't even have a bank account. This story is recreated in the Silicon Valley TV show about Pied Piper, but it really happened to Google. And rather than thinking, hey, we should bank this $12 million, they said, or we should sign this contract, they said, stuff it, will go to Burning Man. So they shut basically the whole company down, put the Burning Man logo on their webpage, using Burning Man to market themselves, and then went out to the desert, came back from Burning Man, and only then signed the papers to incorporate Google as a company, today now worth $600 billion. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of mythology in the story of the origins of Google, but that side of it is actually fairly well known in the tech industry. What's less well known is that Burning Man's theme in 1998, when all this happened, was the nebulous entity. So let me read out about it. The nebulous entity represents a fusion of technology and organic form. One may think of it as a gigantic search engine. The nebulans themselves are a part of this engine, and as integrated members of a living machine, they share a hive mind. This is the launch of Google as a search engine connected to a hive mind. And not only that, this is a picture of the nebulous entity from Stanford. A description: encountering a 32-foot tall pulsating mass of tentacles surrounded by a wild mob of glowing aliens in the middle of nowhere, belting out orgasmic cries and sped up commercials for the Army National Guard is enough to give even the most overstimulated hipster pause. So they launched Google with this satanic skull and bones tree thing, belting commercials out of the Army National Guard and orgasmic cries, right? Driving around Burning Man. And this thing was actually like recording what was going on and then broadcasting it back to people on TV. So they're highlighting to people what would actually happen with Google, which is sucking up all of the data for the NSA. I want to read out a little bit more about this nebulous entity, and this is from the Burning Man newsletter called Building Burning Man, Winter Spring 98 edition. The nebulous entity coincides with a penumbral eclipse at 2:14 a.m. So there's an occult element to the Google launch. Nebulae culture is entirely information-based. During the course of their evolution, the nebulans have genetically merged with a technology that is designed to gather information. The nebulous entity, therefore, represents a fusion of technology and organic form. One may think of it as a gigantic search engine. The nebulans themselves are part of this engine. I already said that, but so here we have Ray Kurzweil now talking about openly a third of our mind is going to be the electronic technology required for us all to interface with Google and mind meld with it. He's not saying this at a science fiction conference. He's saying this at engineering conferences. They're spending billions and billions of dollars to merge our minds with Google. This is absolutely the plan. And this plan didn't emerge in 98 when Sergey Brin and Larry Page were doing some LSD at Burning Man. This plan was well underway even when Burning Man itself broke. But it's very interesting that they were saying all this in 98 with the launch of Google. I'll read one more quote about the nebulous entity, which was the nerve center of an alien civilization, a mobile sculpture, a performance piece, a technological satire of our society, and a shambling mass of tentacles and bric-a-brac. A giant post-apocalyptic, always that word, Pied Piper. Pied Piper, how incredible that word comes up in the Silicon Valley show.
Wow. Pied Piper sounds like a great place to work.
Oh, yeah, it is. Pied Piper is the best, right? Oh, my God.
A giant post-apocalyptic Pied Piper, it roamed Burning Man 98 with a sea of extraterrestrials in tow, emitting fractally structured gibberish and calling into question all notions of reality, information theory, and life itself. However, I am not responsible for the nebulous entity. The Nebulans began as a story told by Larry Harvey of an alien culture incestuously merged with its own technology, scouring the universe for new sources of information. The entity was their info-consumption nexus, embodied by sculptor Michael Christian. At the time I heard of the project, I'd been working on the use of biologically inspired algorithms to create sound. I proposed creating a voice for the entity. The sound system consisted of a laptop, with 500 samples, commercials, TV, radio, movie clips, other sounds frequently heard in our culture, babies crying, car horns, sirens, and then it automatically collected samples from the environment through a microphone, continuously generated fractal waveforms and used them to play randomly selected samples. And this is how you get the commercials for the Army, National Guard, and everything. In the notes to this slide, I've got some links to YouTube where you can see this thing driving around. It's quite a freaky, scary, ominous thing. A giant search engine merging with humans to make our hive mind. The launch of Google. Now, we also the other thing to say about that is that it's forbidden in all the principles and rules of Burning Man to make money. Like, you're not allowed to have anything to do with money in Burning Man. However, that rule is completely waived for Google, and you can go to all number of YouTube Burning Man videos and see advertising being sold and Google making money from Burning Man. They got no compunction about it. And then the other time that came out was in 2007, where they chose their theme to be the Green Man. I don't know if you want to say anything about the occult figure of the Green Man.
Oh, well, it's the ancient figure of plants and drugs. I was going to write a book about the Green Man many years ago. I'm glad I didn't at this point.
Yeah, well, there's a tie-in between the Green Man and the Arthurian mysteries as well. There's one of the Arthurian mysteries is the story of this Green Knight. But in 2007, when Burning Man said it's going to be the Green Man, this is when Elon Musk shows up with the first prototype of the Tesla Roadster, and it's proudly displayed at Burning Man. So he's basically using Burning Man as a showroom to demonstrate the latest innovations. But it wasn't just, hey, Elon's rocked up with the Tesla. Burning Man made their entire theme, the year that Elon was going to rock up with the Tesla, about the environment, about the Green Man. They had an exhibition of wind and solar generation technologies and algae-based biofuels at the base of the Burning Man. It was basically technology venture capital showcase. And to many of us old school burners, that event, 2007, was some mark that as the beginning of the end of Burning Man and slide into mainstream commercial decline. For me, I think the peak year was about 2010. Everyone, it's a bit different. But very interesting that Elon Musk and Google, two of the most powerful figures in the tech world, are so powerful that Burning Man will make a theme to promote their technology. Some of the other themes they've had, Psyche, the Vault of Heaven, Rites of Passage is quite an occult thing. They had a theme in 2013 called Cargo Cult, where the man's base was a giant UFO. And the Cargo Cult is straight out of the PSYOPs manual. There's a specific thing literally in the PSYOPs manual called Strange Gifts from Above, where it talks about this guy, John Froome, and these natives in the Pacific Islands that they got all these supplies that were airdropped by planes during World War II as we were fighting the Japanese, and the supplies weren't collected. So the natives found caches of food and medicine and blankets, and they just went around expecting that gifts from the gods would drop from the sky. And Burning Man made that cult thing its theme. And interestingly, in that message, it's a Carver-induced spirit vision promoting a new age where the missionary occupiers will leave. The natives get to take over all their goods and property. But before they get to do that, they have to spend all of their money in a frenzy. And frenzied spending of money for no purpose or for obscure mythological purposes, that's what Burning Man is all about. Another theme in 2014, the theme was the Silk Road Caravansary. And coincidentally or not, the Silk Road was an underground exchange for buying drugs on the dark web. And the guy that created it, a 27-year-old guy going by that moniker of Dread Pirate Roberts, he was busted less than a mile from Burning Man headquarters in the library in the mission. So they make the theme the Silk Road, and the guy that created the Silk Road gets arrested next to Burning Man. Another coincidence.
Ding.
Yeah. The Carnival of Mirrors was last year. The Wilderness of Mirrors is a common phrase to describe the intelligence community. And then this year is Da Vinci's Workshop and the Medici. And this year we're seeing really a complete repudiation of the former values of Burning Man, which were all about anyone can do art and anyone's art is as good as any. This year, the messages coming from the Burning Man organization are really returning to that Renaissance patronage model of art that artists are poor. Rich people need to give money to artists to create art. Rich people can participate in art by funding art projects. And it's very aligned to crowdsourcing and the ethos of the internet in 2016, but it's getting away from the all-inclusive idea of Burning Man from the beginning. And there's a lot more occult themes than that. Basically, most of the themes at Burning Man have had are occult. But now let's drill down specifically on their very first theme, which is Hellco, the Inferno. And this was not just everybody dress up like the devil and go to Burning Man. This was like a very, very involved, intricate, elaborate production. They had several shows over multiple weeks in the city of San Francisco, all Hellco themed. They produced a 10-minute long infomercial promoting Hellco, and then they had a series of Hellco events and operas and things like that out in the desert. So first, maybe we'll have a look at a few clips that I've pulled out of the infomercial. Let's play that, clip 36.
Ooh, sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it, Nick?
You're not kidding, Lilith. Burn it all up now. Well, let me tell you, fellow sinners, there's no welfare plan in the infernal regions, and you can't buy a golden harp with wooden nickels either. But I've got some exciting news. Now you can take it with you. Thanks to that recent cosmic deregulation, Hellco is now proud to offer an incredibly diverse portfolio of trans-dimensional financial products, and all on the convenient Sin Now, Pay Later plan you've come to expect from the world's largest spiritual management organization. Hellco. When we say forever, we mean forever. The good life. No waiting. Hellco.
That's right, Nick. Fresh and exciting new ideas, like Hellco's new Soul Equity line of credit account, which actually computes your sin-to-grace ratio in real time and lets you borrow against future transgressions, pay down soul debt, and get cash at ATM machines worldwide through the exclusive Hellco Gold Card. Don't take any chances. Get the soul security you know you deserve. Call now for details.
God, that felt
good. As unlikely as it might seem to you and me, there are still a few lost souls out there who don't know the Hellco story.
But you know, a lot of people out there still don't believe. They just don't get it. They say, yeah, that's all very cosmic, but what's in it for me?
Everything! Everything you could possibly want, and so much more. I know, it sounds too good to be true, but it is. You get everything, whatever your heart desires. You get it all now and pay for it later, much later. Yes, much, much later.
So here are some of the flyers from the Hellco event, promoting the events in the city at the Somar Gallery on Brannan Street. You've got that there is Papa Satan, the guy from doing Da Vinci Code. He dressed up as the head devil. He had assistant devils as well. Hell yes, hell no. It says on this one flyer there, it says, a satirically satanic evening of insanity. But that's the only time in any of the flyers or marketing materials or the commercials or the making of the commercial or anything that you ever see related to Hellco that you see the word satirically is in this one flyer. You know, if the word wasn't there, you could be forgiven for thinking that they're really just, you know, the theme of it is hell because it's Satan and the devils. But here is where this delicious word irony comes in for the Satanists. Look, oh, look, we're being satirical. We don't really sell our soul to the devil, you know. It's just a guy in a costume. It's all for laughs.
Even though they did have people going around passing out contracts for you to sell your soul.
Yep, absolutely. And I've got a clip of that in a second. But let's look at this clip now, clip 37, which shows this parade of freaks coming into these Halco events.
I've got 7 beautiful women. Okay.
Let's have a roundup.
Okay, so they're going to come. They got whips and shit, so they're going to come in and
They're
you
also
tell them what to
fire
do.
inspectors coming tonight too.
Yeah, we're going to sick them on this fire inspector.
Sure. Smother that guy with love.
So remember, they're yours, okay? Okay. I'm the Minotaur. I'm like I report directly to the devils, and I'll do anything you want, you know. And I got these ladies, which are your concubines. I'm the eunuch that takes care of them.
There's a successful Burning Man executive. Could you
I
tell us
gotta
about
get
the
the
profits?
talent out here. We pay them $1 million, and they don't even show up on time.
Really? They're
We're
not here?
off schedule right now. God damn it.
Hey, a camera guy. Look at that.
Ladies and gentlemen, all this and more can be introduced to the sales representative. Ready to serve you. Smart
And so here now we're talking about what was the vision of Halco. So in a series of pre-festival events in San Francisco, this is to launch the first theme, remember. Artists and Cacophonous hatched various plays and subplots, all based on Dante's Inferno, and all supporting a central story about the takeover of Burning Man by Halco and its CEO, Papa Satan. Now, I don't think I've read Dante's Inferno unless I read it at school when I was about 14 or 15, but
I've got it sitting right there.
yeah, well, you might want to have a look at it and see if it talks about Jonestown or it talks about corporations, if McDonald's is featured in it as McSatan's. But, you know, I don't really think that there was a heck of a lot going on in this to do with Dante's Inferno, but there was certainly a lot of modern impressions of hell, and with the devil being this debauched, lecherous kind of figure. So Stuart Mangrum, he's the only person in Burning Man's official employee list on their webpage who claims a military background. He's ex-Air Force, and he was the very first minister for propaganda. It says, after 94, Larry wanted a theme for the entire festival. I made fun of him. What, like Enchantment Under the Sea? Like it's a prom? But there were getting to be some real tensions. In 95, there was the first rave, and it went 24/7 and kept people up. So I think Larry thought a theme would help define it. So basically what's happened, as soon as the music started going into Burning Man, it started to get really, really popular, and thousands of people wanted to go. In the beginning, when it was just some Cacophony Society people doing LSD in a pith helmet, there's like 20 people, 40 people. But they became very concerned, they being the thought influencers of Burning Man, they became very concerned that these ravers would just come over and take it and it would become another rave and not the occult, mystical, societal, technological experiment that they'd designed it to be. So they're seeing this thing of themes as a way to keep the ravers away, help define what it is. How do they want to define Burning Man? With Halco, with Satan. Michael, he's ex-Navy. The whole theme was a parody about commerce. The idea was that the devil was going to take over Burning Man. He ran a fictitious company called Halco, and it was like the end of the world. I mean, this theme was extremely, extremely elaborate, and from the video clips I'm showing you get a sense of that. But you can also go on the internet, and there's hours of YouTube of what they're doing. Let's have a look at one of them, which is the making of the Helco behind the scenes, clip 39.
Stuart and I worked on shows back in 1996, the year we did Helco, which in San Francisco, which presaged our first full theme in the desert.
And well, what they encounter is Helco. Helco bought out.
Right.
And they now run it, and very efficiently.
This is hell.
This
guy's going to be sitting up here all weekend long.
Somebody like no, there'll be 2 other temp devils. There are 3 temp devils. The devil is looking. Helco has taken over, and hell isn't as much fun as it used to be.
What else?
Helco's taking the fun out of hell. So they come in here and they'll encounter the soul sucker, which physically sucks the soul out of your body.
It's a machine that.
It's a machine. Yeah, it processes your soul.
It sucks the soul. What?
Take your hands out of the straps, please, and let me escort you down. We will take your soul and keep it for as long as we can.
I feel empty inside now, though.
See, that's good. That's what we want you to feel. Yeah, that's what we're supposed to feel. We love you.
Just what, improvising material? Or
everything, it's all Helco oriented. It all tells the Helco story. That's Crimson Rose. She lights the man every year, and she's actually the director of the show.
And who cooked all this up? You?
The themes, yeah.
What do you think? Isn't she look cool?
Have you seen the script Stuart's working on?
Yeah. So what do? They don't sit on Satan's lap, right? I mean, what do they do once they're up here?
Oh, he gives them a sucker.
Oh, that's right, the red sucker for the soul. It's in the contract. First paragraph in the contract.
Is that right there?
Yeah, it says it right there. I read it today. Stuart's contract. Get the red sucker.
One red sucker. Actually, Doug Holloway right there.
So come on in. Here, would you take a look at this?
The Eternity Fund.
The fine print is really something to
That's
behold.
pretty impressive, but can I afford it?
Lots of it.
When you're talking about eternity, can you
I guess I'll sign. Here, there you go.
So how are the sales going? How are the sales going?
Sales are going incredibly well. I've been catching them going early. This crowd sold their souls to me. I had one gentleman not only sign his soul, but the souls of his children. Christ sakes.
I want to see some girl
Controlled mayhem again.
Yeah, it's like the desert. It's participatory. It's proactive. You don't sit and see it. You don't sit and see it.
Got it.
You do it.
Lots of weird shit. How would you describe it? Lots of weird stuff? Weird, the right word?
Oh, yeah, weird is a good name for us. We like the weird. We're beyond the odd and the strange.
Beyond the what?
We're beyond the odd and the strange and the weird. We're wholly other.
Feel the burn, ladies and gentlemen. Feel the burn.
So, they're having a grand old time with this. I've got an image there from the performance of the speeches of Reverend Jim Jones, and people can find that clip themselves. But this guy has basically listened to the tapes of Jim Jones speaking to his congregation, and he has recreated them word for word, including the 2 last recordings of Jones's speeches that are on record. Now, first of all, how does he even get the recordings of Jim Jones's speeches, right? That's kind of bizarre. But when you see it in the video, he's doing it with the inflection, with the charisma, with everything, as if he really is channeling Jim Jones. Now, that's a hell of a funny thing to put into Burning Man's first theme, the CIA drug cult, which, by the way, was connected to San Francisco as well.
I just got to say it. There are ties between Jim Jones and Jerry Brown.
Okay, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, you get a sense that this Satan thing was pretty big to Burning Man. Here's the layout of Helco in 1996. So that you notice that the Pentagon isn't there yet. This is to me kind of the year when after this event, the Pentagon takeover really started to move into full gear, I think. But there's I don't know if you could see from this flyer, but it's sort of after they burned the man, there was a progression through these different stages at the top left, which are the gates of hell. There's an artistic group called the Seamen. They created a lot of these statues. And then there's a guy called Pepe Ozan who used to do very, very involved, elaborate operas, kind of like a modern satanic version of a rock opera out at Burning Man. And the climactic event was all the devils and everyone going to Pepe Ozan's opera with all these like fallen angels dancing around. And in last week's show, in the clips, we showed the goat, a goat sitting there at Burning Man, and they had a live goat out as part of this operatic ceremonies and rituals being performed at Burning Man. Nobody knows what happened to the goat. There was some concern, and there was a statement from the artist saying that the goat was not harmed. But we have to take their word on that again. I don't know why you're bringing a live goat to Burning Man, that's for sure. Anyway, unfortunately, this event didn't work out very well, and it turned out to be Burning Man's Altamont. One person was killed, and 3 people were seriously injured. Here's some stories of it. Vanessa Kumale, she was dating John Law, I believe, who was one of the 3 earlier founders of Burning Man. She says, we're waiting for a coroner and the sheriff. An SUV comes up, or a minivan. Larry and a few other people get out. Larry bursts onto the scene. He says, I swear to fucking God, 4 times in a row, there's no blood on our hands. My jaw was on the plier. It was one of those moments of looking into someone's mind and not being too excited about what I saw. So there's that obsession with blood again. Joe Fenton, he's an ex-military guy that was the head of security out there. Larry's way of dealing with 1996 was to try and control what was getting to the media. When Michael Fury died, the first thing Larry did was look at his watch. He made sure to say it happened at 11:30 the night before the event officially began, so it didn't happen at the festival, but before the festival, as if Fury's death was somehow not related. It was a stupid, alcoholic, moronic death, but you couldn't deny that he chose this event to die at. So how this guy died, apparently he went and got drunk in the nearby town of Gerlach, and he was riding a motorcycle back to the camp, which is about 5 or 6 miles, and he was playing chicken with an oncoming pickup truck, and the pickup truck didn't swerve, and he ran into the side mirror of the truck and was instantly decapitated. Yeah, I mean it's a drunken accident, but that wasn't the only tragedy of the Helco event. And it's worth mentioning just on the decapitation that Jane Mansfield, who joined the Church of Satan, she died in a car accident, and there's rumors that she was actually decapitated in the car accident, and her producer boyfriend, who also died in that accident, was cursed by Anton LaVey. So it does occur sometimes with these Satanists, this whole concept of beheading. Maybe there was a more dark, sinister sacrifice. Maybe this was genuinely an accident, but they create all of this energy around dark magic and somebody dies. Now, the other thing that happened is that this rave camp that they said they didn't like the ravers, so they put them a mile away from the main Burning Man activities. And so to get out there, you had to basically drive there. And driving was still allowed on the playa back in those days. And there were some people camping in a tent. Another guy got super drunk in a pickup truck, ran over the tent, and they were boiling some water inside the tent. He knocked the water over, or maybe the water came from the radiator of the truck, and one woman got scalded with this boiling water. One guy got his head crushed and was in a coma, I think, for about 6 months. He survived. This other woman, I think got very badly burned from the scalding. And so we have absolute chaos and carnage converging on Burning Man around the time of this Helco satanic event. Larry Harvey himself, he says, when it came down to it, there was this argument in 96 that divided myself and others. John Law was among them. The members of that crowd who put out a T-shirt that said, Burning Man, Woodstock or Altamont, you be the judge. You could tell they were secretly rooting for Altamont.
Well, and Woodstock had its own rapes and things going on too, and I've done plenty of research on that.
Yeah, well, that's an irony of that statement, and based on your research, Woodstock is.
And people should go to my website and research the shows I've done on Altamont and Woodstock.
So there's an image there of that actual T-shirt, and then also this little thing, Hollywood Damnation of Tinseltown. This was created by the LA Cacophony Society as well, I think. So there we have burning Marilyn Monroe and Hollywood and that in effigy. We have these weird skull demon figures in suits all around the playa this year. And we have this little book showing the Burning Man Project, which is what it's called today. This is the first time I can see it being referred to as a project, was this quite fancy, elaborate-looking book showing up around 1986. The aftermath of all of this happening, the next year, was that basically they formed a new organization, a new LLC came in and it took over. Marion Goodell, the current CEO, she came into the scene as Larry's companion. That was her word for it. Supposedly, the two of them were in a relationship for a while and now have a professional working relationship. But basically, what happened after this chaos got out of control is, it seems to me, the woman took over. And that was probably a very good thing in the history of Burning Man, and it enabled Burning Man to continue and go on. But it may well have been that as these women came in and took over, they brought in with them connections and political support that helped Burning Man survive and get out of trouble, but may have played a role in then shaping the direction that this event went in and what it grew to be. This flyer here on the right, Burning Man has an archive in the Bancroft Library at Berkeley. And I went in there to look for it, and there were two boxes, and one of the boxes was missing, which I thought was very strange. But I put my name down. They said if they ever found it, they'd call me back. And sure enough, they found it. The only thing in there was this one flyer of the Burning Man symbol stylized as Jesus on the cross, also stylized as a woman in a skirt. So it's interesting that this thing went missing. Interesting as well that after we released part one, it showed up again.
That's been since we started. That's interesting.
Yep, since we started. And, here we see again the attack on Christian symbology, the attack on God, the woman is the martyr or whatever. I've also included this group here called the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, because what I think happens, and, this is, I first went to Burning Man in 98, but I was in San Francisco before 1998. And what I sort of see, what my own personal analysis of what happened around this time is that Burning Man started to merge with the Castro street culture, the LGBT movement in San Francisco, and these street fairs that were happening, the Folsom Street Fair, Castro Street Fair, How Weird Street Fair. There's basically, from about this 97, 98 onwards, Burning Man wasn't so much the underground thing of San Francisco as the underground scenes of San Francisco were coming out into the mainstream and using Burning Man as one of their vehicles to do it. So all these different scenes started merging together. John Law, early founder from 89 to 96, he quit after this whole thing. And in quitting, he specifically said that Larry Harvey is evil. He knows the guy and he's evil. Not he acts evil or he does evil things. He is evil. So putting that in the context of the reason he quit was an event called Helco. Things are adding up a little bit there. In 1997, the theme that came back is Gaia and cults. And I think hopefully we'll have time to get into that a little bit more today. But after this point, the government seems to have been the ally of Burning Man. Before that point, they seem to have been fighting against the sheriff, fighting against the authority. And, they still have their run-ins with the authorities today, but go ahead.
Well, I think it's just like with Timothy Leary. He admits he's CIA from 62, but then he has run-ins with the local Orange County Laguna police. He's put on trial in Orange County Superior Court. He's put in jail in San Luis Obispo or minimum security prison where he escapes, but he tries to sell the rights of the escape to Hollywood before he does it.
In advance,
So what we have again is this disconnection between what the Pentagon is doing and the intelligence community and the Presidio and the local law enforcement of Nevada who's dealing with this.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll get into some of those things in the future episodes as well. And I think just with Leary and all those escapes, it sort of was the El Chapo of his day, right? This
Right,
drug kingpin linked to the CIA that keeps mysteriously getting out.
Yeah, well, and that, it's just, it was all a dog and pony show, but they had to run Leary through the courts and everything to give him legitimacy. The CIA wants to distance themselves from that as much as possible. And it's like, look, we'll do what we can in the background to get you out, but if you get busted, you get busted.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think Burning Man is the largest event on federal land, and they pay $3 or $4 million a year to the federal government to do it. It makes sense that they have to have interactions with the authorities to do this event. And, I think any professional event promoter has good relationships with the authorities. That's just a requirement. But in the case of Burning Man, the links go much, much deeper than that. And even just in recent events, what we've seen is Harry Reid coming out to speak, in favor of Burning Man. So they've hired the former head of the BLM as now a consultant and lobbyist for Burning Man. So they've got very, very high level Washington connections. And that may have played a role in the fact that they can just keep going despite the fact that, everyone from Oprah Winfrey to The Simpsons knows that people are taking drugs at Burning Man. It's crawling with federal authorities, and yet it keeps going on. And the other thing is that this Helco death, basically it was the first, but it was by no means the last. And Burning Man basically has at least one death every year. And one of the things is that to be pronounced dead, it usually happens, they take them off the side of Burning Man and to the hospital in Reno Sparks. And if they're pronounced dead in Reno, then it's not a statistic for Burning Man. And so that's something that they keep doing to this day. And it's the same thing actually with if a girl feels that she's been raped at Burning Man, she has to leave Burning Man and go in a 2 or 3 hour drive in a police car to a hospital to have a rape kit administered because they refuse to have the ability to do that exam on the plier. And it's a real point of contention in some people amongst the community. But having a look at all these deaths here, not all of them were at Burning Man. Some of them are Burning Man volunteers who killed themselves shortly after, and then some of them are at regional events. I mentioned Jim Keith, the conspiracy author. He died at Burning Man. You've got a guy called J. Houston Marks. He's an anti-nuclear campaigner and activist. He was found at the North Carolina Regional, face down in some water there. You've got also this one guy, Caleb Shooter Shaber. He was a DPW, which is Burning Man's volunteer group that actually built the city. He was a volunteer for them for a long time, and then he was recruited out of Burning Man into the Department of Defense, sent to Iraq as a photographer. He was quite vocal against some of the bad things about Burning Man. This guy's a bit of a hero of the burner community in my eyes, but he committed a very, very horrible and public suicide related to Burning Man. And then we had another guy a couple of years back at the Utah regional event, went and jumped in the fire and killed himself in front of about 1,200 people, which would have been an absolute horrible tragedy. But, they keep having these deaths year after year after year, these weird, mysterious deaths. That's a Burning Man. I mean, sure, it's a big city. People die in a big city. It's a festival. People take drugs. People overdose and die at festivals. I get both of those things, but you have to look at it proportionally and in relation to other festivals. For example, Glastonbury was going for 23 years before they had their first death. And Glastonbury, as far as I can tell, has had nowhere near as many deaths as Burning Man. Any other rave that was, if someone was dying every single year at this party, I don't think the government would let them keep going with it. So that's a little bit of an anomaly there. Rest in peace, all these people. So moving on now to, and I think to wrap up the segment on the occult of Burning Man, we start to look at some of the specific elements in it that are really cult-like and occult. And here we have the similarities to the ancient mystery religion. We have our good buddy Gordon Wasson teaming up with Hoffman and Ruck to write a book about the road to Aloysius.
You know, and the irony, Steve, episode number 1 of Gnostic Media was an interview I did with Professor Carl Ruck at his home in Boston. And, of course, now I've completely distanced myself from those people and what I've discovered, and I've gone through exposing major... I've requested an investigation for academic fraud on Carl Ruck. He's the one who actually invented the word entheogen. And, of course, Albert Hoffman is the CIA French intelligence guy who supposedly invented LSD, but it was probably invented by his boss, Arthur Stoll. And then, of course, Gordon Wasson who is the so-called discoverer of magic mushrooms, and he created the entire religion around them that did not exist prior in Aztec culture.
Yeah, but I think that there's also, as you've covered before, these guys were trying to recreate the rites of Aloysius.
Absolutely.
And what it seemed like happens in those days is that all of the members of society got to participate in this festival. Didn't matter if you're a king or a slave.
Right.
You know,
you got to participate one time in your life.
Right. And so you'd go there and you'd have this magic sacrament, possibly LSD related, possibly magic mushroom related, but some kind of hallucinogen it seems. And you would realize there was like a mystical element to the world. And in looking at the historical role of this ceremony, it seems to have been used by 2 quite wealthy and powerful families to control society for centuries, regardless of who the actual ruler was.
The Yermalpids and the Kirkneys were in control of that for about 2,000 years. So they had, the Greek government and everything had total control of that, which is exactly what we see with the CIA and Pentagon and Presidio and Army Intel and everybody else involved in Burning Man.
And then we see also the Hellfire Clubs. They were trying to recreate these rites. Aleister Crowley was doing it. He put on a play about it that was quite controversial. And then we've got Wasson and that trying to recreate these rites. And then you've got Timothy O'Neill, the true founder of Burning Man, esoteric scholar. Everything he's about is this ancient Western mystery tradition. So this is this mystery religion. It's considered to be the religion at the heart of Freemasonry, as I understand it. And one of the things about it was this egalitarian, inclusive idea that everyone's kind of brought on the same level by these mysteries. And Burning Man incorporates that idea. The other thing is I've got a map here of the actual temple at Aloysius where they did this. And it has this semicircular kind of shape in it, just like Burning Man. And that, to me, seems to be the stage where the performances and messages were delivered. But looking at these elements here that are in common between the ancient mystery religion and Burning Man, but the drugs, the sex, ritual, sacrifice, indoctrination, secrets.
Teenage allowances.
Yeah, well, the teenagers are allowed. Fire, the dancing, and the drumming, the rhythm. The theatre, the theatrical aspect, that there's stuff going on that you can relate to in ordinary society, but in a mystical kind of way. When that brings in the masks and costumes, smoke and mirrors, quite literally were being used in these performances, and I think that's probably where that phrase even comes from. They were using forms of hypnosis in these ceremonies and using the suggestogens to enhance the hypnosis. And there's a concept that there's a utopian vision, that there's a better life than what you're living in the outside world. There's something more to life. Burning Man has actually been directly linked to the mystery cults and the rites of Aloysius by the founder, Larry Harvey. So he wrote in this Gnosis magazine in 1995. He wrote under a pseudonym of Darrell Van Ray, which is rearranging the letters of Larry Harvey plus ND, probably for nom de plume. And he said, throughout the classic period of Western civilization, there existed a diverse spiritual movement that's known as mystery religion. The mystery cults, as they're called, arose within a new world order. The mystery cults, long a dominant form of idol worship in the late classical world, perished with the fall of Greco-Roman civilization. Yet the modern immolation of the Burning Man, surrounded by impromptu rites of celebration, forms an arresting analogy. The parallels are striking. Fire, sacrifice, pilgrimage, visionary spectacle, egalitarianism, revelry, recruitment from an urban population, direct experience opposed to doctrinal belief, and central to it all, a myth of death and rebirth. Organisers of this modern mystery disclaim any conscious plan to reproduce the past, yet it might be that culture itself is responding to the changing needs of our society. As students of ritual understand, the past and present rotate on a single wheel of time. Now, so he's directly linking Burning Man to these ancient mystery rites. I mean, there can be no doubt about it, but he's also saying that they arose within a new world order. He's linking it to the new world order. Now, the statement that the mystery religion perished with the fall of Greco-Roman civilization, I don't believe that to be true, and we'll look a bit more in the future about secret societies, but the Roman Catholic Church is still incredibly powerful. It's still based in the city of Rome. It's got all the land and the money, you know what I mean? So, and within the history of the popes and the Catholic Church, you find these mystery cults, and you know, also, as I've mentioned, the idea of the sage, the seer, the Merlin, like a guy like John Dee. Most of these figures seem to have been initiates of this mystery religion and placed in high places in society for the last 2,000 years. So, in fact, I believe that this mystery religion never went away, but I think that under Blavatsky and Theosophy was a desire to bring it more out into the mainstream. Crowley took that, ran with it, created it, and the entire thing of the 60s was to bring the occult into the mainstream with Disney and everything like that. And now that they've done it, they're now within the mainstream building their own little sects of the occult again, within Satanism, paganism, Wicca, and so on. All of it being an attack on the family unit and trying to replace it with this state as God type of concept. Another quote here from Larry Harvey, and this is from the New Yorker magazine. And actually, this quote's not, the first one's not from Larry Harvey, I'm just quoting the magazine. Burning Man is no model UN, but as a congregation of self-appointed outliers in silly hats, it was a forerunner of the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street. In recent years, it has acquired an establishment vibe, in part because of its role as a laboratory for social organisation. This year, it attracted 68,000 people who live for a week in a tent, trailer, and motorhome civilization, which has its own gift-based economy. There's no money allowed except for buying coffee and ice. Airport, law enforcement, emergency services, and electrical grid. So, you know, they're making no qualms about it being a laboratory for social organisation. This is more than a dance party. And this is at a function in New York.
I was just going to say, apparently the Harvard Social Relations Department, responsible for much of MKUltra of the 60s, just moved to BlackRock.
Yeah. Harvey spoke about the festival's global ambitions. Burning Man's guided by what initiates call the 10 principles. I won't go through them all. These ideas, Harvey suggested, might one day form the basis of a new world order. So there you go again. That's twice now the Burning Man founder is linking it to a new world order. Burners have helped revitalise downtown Las Vegas and met with members of the Australian government. We're planning for 100 years, Harvey told the crowd. If we can govern the way we want, then what we've all experienced at Burning Man will be a very common experience. When the world comes to a crisis, and we know it's coming, that's when the burner knowledge will come in handy. So they want Burning Man to be, you know, the way that the world is governed. You know, this is their vision, that Burning Man will be governed the way we want. Now, this is a society where there is no elections. You know, these self-appointed oligarchs rule everything. There's a lot of volunteers, as we said in the talking about the Church of Satan, that their goal was to segment their supporters into doers and shouters and money exchanges and everything like that. Well, Burning Man is segmented into all that type of stuff as well, but nobody gets paid. Everyone's working for free. The people at the top get all of the money with absolutely no accountability or transparency, and a whole massive amount of drugs is being handed out everywhere for people to be lulled into enjoying their electronic concentration camp of the mind, you know?
Yeah, first they create McLuhan's Global Village, and then they create the Global Crisis to go with it.
Yeah, and you know, this is not just one guy talking. They've had Dennis Kucinich and Wesley Clark out to Burning Man recently. Both of those guys ran for president They've got Obama talking at the White House Correspondents' Dinner about his daughter wants to go to Burning Man. I mean,
well, and isn't Dennis Kucinich another Satanist as well? I think I've seen a video. Maybe you showed me a video of Kucinich fully embedded with these guys.
Yeah, that wasn't me. I don't have any information on him being a Satanist, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. But, we'll delve in a bit further to Burning Man's connections to the New World Order in future episodes. But for now, let's just highlight that there's the guy saying in his own words, this is the basis of it. And, Burning Man, as fun as it seems, if you go there for the first time, you'll have a great time probably. And there's beautiful people half naked. It's always fun to look at that, But it is not the basis for a solid society. For humanity for the next 10,000 years is not a rave in the desert. Like that, anybody to think that is deluded. But these people really do believe it.
That's how you crash society completely and run everybody back to the Stone Age into a neo-feudalist system, and that's exactly what they want with these guys at the top.
Yep, it's a basis to turn everyone into serfs in the electronic concentration camp and implement neo-feudalism in the form of these electronic hives such as Google and Facebook.
Yep.
So putting the cult or the M cult Ra is that the cult of Ra, MK Ultra, back into culture. And I want to just read some quotes about Burning Man. This is from their own words. It's a self-service cult. You wash your own brain. We put the cult back into culture. It's a machine with hardware and software. It can transform personalities. You can tweak it, and we've done that. I think we showed that clip already. We consider ourselves primarily to be social engineers. Burning Man's principles could one day be the basis of a new world order. We might be Satanists, but we're Satanists with guns. The guy John Law who quit, he said, after all, we're not druids. But then he quit, so maybe they were druids after all. It came out of the black water. It's Larry Harvey. If you didn't have a sense of agency, I could easily see rivers of blood. That's Larry Harvey as well. It's a spiritual experience. The temple casts a kind of magic spell, right? So as we talked about with the Satanism episode, although these people are saying that Satanism is yourself is God, there is no God, we don't worship a being, when you actually look at the practices of the Anton LaVey's and Michael Aquinos of the world, they are tapping into these dark forces. They are tapping into the supernatural. They are trying to channel it, And so the same as Burning Man, they might say, oh, we're secular, we're atheists, this isn't about religion. At the same time, they have a temple and they say it's a spiritual experience, and they say the temple casts a magic spell. So there are a lot of similarities to the other list of Stanford and Esalen and Aquarius cults that you've put together. We'll look at that on the next slide. That Burning Man, they have their off-site strategy sessions at Esalen. There seems to be a huge cultural overlap between Esalen and Burning Man, as I think you encountered when after the Burning Man leadership conference we were talking on Facebook to a couple of people from Esalen, and when you called them out on being CIA, the guy said, "Yep, that's true. You're guilty as charged."
And then they edited the video and re-uploaded it to Facebook to cover it all up. That I had called them out on that. That's right.
Who knew that Facebook Live allowed you to go back into your videos and do editing? Maybe not so long.
Apparently, we don't have the clearance to do that.
So there are some really, really solid, strong, and very, very deep ties between Burning Man and Stanford and Berkeley. I mean, that's probably to be expected with it happening in San Francisco, but we should note that they're basically the major MK Ultra centers, right? I mean, if you want to point to one university responsible for MK Ultra in the 60s, I would put Stanford up there more than Harvard. You agree?
I would say that's a pretty close tie.
Yeah. Anyway, we could argue that one all night. Also, in San Francisco, we have the Operation Midnight Climax, where they are doing LSD honey traps for the purposes of blackmail to people in North Beach with hidden cameras.
It just occurred to me, they have those sodomy tents and multi-partner tents and stuff at Burning Man. You just set up cameras in there and see who you catch.
Well, I mean, there was one of the porta potties at Burning Man had a sticker on it saying, "Smile, you're under video surveillance," when you're sitting there in it. And I seriously look for the camera because I could just imagine some of the burners, that'd be their thing. You know?
Absolutely.
But absolutely, like there's an incredible opportunity for those type of things to go on. The link into Stanford in itself is quite interesting. Stanford has an occult background. Like Stanford was actually created from a seance. The idea to make a university came when Leland and Jane Stanford had a Ouija board seance to contact their young son that had recently passed away. There's also Jane Stanford herself was murdered. She announced on the front page of the San Francisco newspaper, "I have been murdered." And then a guy called David Starr Jordan, who was tight to the Rockefellers and a eugenicist, he seems to be involved in the cover-up. There's all kinds of ghosts have been seen at Stanford. There's a satanic ritual murder of a girl called Alice Perry. That Perry name comes up a lot. They have Perry Lane down at Stanford where the first acid tests were going on as well. And yeah, there's all of the psychedelic stuff. And then the entire UC, University of California system was set up by Daniel Coit Gilman, who was one of the founders of Skull and Bones and the Russell Trust. You've got Menlo Park and Palo Alto, the VA hospital down there, quite a big VA hospital. That was ground zero of MK Ultra experiments. Vacaville Mental Prison, that's on the road to Burning Man from San Francisco. Jonestown wasn't that far away. So, you know, this is happening in the center of so much of these cult activities, and the characteristics of a cult will draw into that a little bit more, but just quickly, peer pressure, public shaming, creation myth, charismatic leadership, rejection, distrust of outsiders, recognizable uniform and vocabulary, and those who leave get shunned. Burning Man has all of those elements, and you can see the type of character assassination they try to do to me just for speaking out about it by saying, here's what they said in their own words. I think for many people, that's quite a powerful impediment. You know, I've been lucky to be successful in life, so it doesn't affect me too much what Burning Man people think of me one way or the other. So I'm not afraid to speak my mind. But many of the people that are caught up in this community, it means the world to them what Burning Man people think of them. And if they're suddenly shunned and rumors start going around that they're a bad person, their whole social life can collapse.
Yeah, you know, and I've had people contact me completely distraught over this stuff and losing their friends and everything for talking about this stuff or sharing our videos on their Facebook page or anything else.
Yeah, so a lot of definite cult-like behaviours there. And so this is what we're talking about. This is your list, and there's your buddy Pinchbeck doing the 666 at Burning Man. I mean, I think you've probably possibly updated this list even since I.
Yeah, I think there's like 54 or something. And in fact, you can see Carl Ruck right there in the list. Demeter Cult, we just mentioned him, and Albert Hoffman, Bicycle Day Cult. Yeah, but and this isn't a complete list. These were just the ones I could create, or the ones I could think of off the top of my head, sitting there for a couple of hours, and then eventually plugging some more in. You know,
but I mean, it's quite incredible how influential some of these cults have been on the world. You know,
absolutely.
But most of these people have actually heard of the names and the cults, and when you look behind them, that's when we find all these same actors. You know, you find Stanford behind almost every one of them. You find LSD or some other drugs involved in most of them. You find the CIA connected to very, very many of them. So, you know, in that sense, the cult of Burning Man is just really fitting in a very long line of these things being generated from the Bay Area. Now, this one here, Burning Man has a famous story. They're a self-service cult. You wash your own brain. I have a clip on that. Let's play that.
Yeah, right.
Clip 10.
It sounds like a conversion experience, you know, in religious terms. Though when they say we're a cult, and said too, that we reply that it's a self-service cult. You wash your own brain. And
you do what?
You wash your own brain.
Yes.
And they want us to burn wash them. You know, that's like greenwashing and brainwashing.
So you don't,
we've always said we're a self-service.
So you want people to share among the community, but you don't want
wash your own brain.
You're trying.
There are some parallels, it's true, but while Burning Man certainly has some syntheistic aspects, it's a phrase I learned this morning. we've actually endeavored over the years to not make it into a religion, to not make it into a cult, right? Or if it is a cult, I like to quote Danger Ranger on this, that it's a self-service cult. You have to wash your own brain. Neither would I really call it a philosophy, because neither Larry nor I are philosophers. Larry, if you ask him, would describe himself as a social engineer. I would describe myself as a troublemaker.
We're heading toward a city with 100,000 people, perhaps. We'll have to design it so that people can form relationships better within it. You know, that's what we do. We're social engineers. It's one of our skills.
So as you can see, brainwashing is absolutely part of it. There's no hiding that, you know. And but also social engineering. That's they see themselves as social engineers. Now, what Larry Harvey does officially, he picks a theme, and then those street names from A to L, he makes up the words for it. And then the other guy, Propaganda Minister Stuart Mangrum, helps them with that. That's really what they do. How is that social engineering, right? There's got to be much more going on in Burning Man in a much more coordinated way for these people to see themselves as social engineers.
Well, you know, we need to get in there and just study the whole operation as, you know, a group who studies the anthropologists who study Burning Man.
Yeah.
And
anthropologize the anthropologists.
Exactly. Well, anthropologize the anthropologists and the intelligence community, and just get a 60,000 foot view of the operation. I mean, you know, that's the only interest I would have in ever going. I had a friend who went to probably 12 or 15 of them and killed himself in 2010, and he was just involved in all of this stuff, and in neck deep. And looking back, he was caught in the mind control, he was caught in the Satanism, and that's how his life ended.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a large number of suicides that you hear about within this community, and I was involved in the rave scene, and I was the major investor in a large nightclub for many years. And we in the nightclub, we would have had far more people going through the door than Burning Man's had in its entire life. And there was nowhere near the number of suicides and accidental deaths related to that scene. And in Australia, people aren't doing high-quality drugs from the Stanford chemistry lab. They're doing backyard stuff made in bathtubs by bikie gangs, and you'd think that's the type of thing that would cause the most social problems. And yet, for some reason, the rave scene in Australia doesn't have all of these suicides linked to it that seem to be, so...
Let's not give them any ideas, Steve, on how to direct their...
Got to make speed, yeah. So just talking about the Burning Man as a cult, this guy, Eric Davis, has written quite extensively on spirituality, and particularly as it applies to Burning Man. And so in this book here, he's saying, the essential cult is the cult of experience, a cult to which all burners in some sense belong. I'll also talk about the cult of intoxicants, the cult of juxtapose, the cult of flicker, and the cult of meaningless chaos. My list is not at all definitive. Important black rock cults such as the cult of flesh and the cult of sleeplessness will have to be treated elsewhere. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. There's seven cults going on at Burning Man right there from someone who's a spiritual analyst of Burning Man. Another one here, Mark Pesce, very, very smart guy, virtual reality pioneer. He said, why has Burning Man become a cult? Well, it's actually really easy to explain. Black Rock City is a crucible, combined more often than not with intense doses of psychedelic drugs. If you were going to design an environment for brainwashing, you'd be hard-pressed to come across a more effective situation that already exists in Black Rock City. Right? We're a self-service cult, wash your own brain. The founders are telling you that. Yeah. Genius guys are saying you couldn't come up with a better environment for it.
And sure, yeah, you're going to wash your own brain, even though the whole thing is designed as a huge mind control op, and these people don't even get it. They think you and I are crazy for exposing this stuff, without watching the stuff.
Yeah. But, the idea behind it, when they say wash your own brain, is we don't tell you anything. You can be free. We want you to just be free who you are, express yourself. But the thing is, the entire world that they're in, that's the message. The images, the words, the people, where they're being shifted and led, the cultural values. They're being exposed to that. They might be encouraged to be their own person, but in fact, they're being very much encouraged to conform with this herd mentality around something that has been artificially constructed, socially engineered. And as we've shown today, it's been artificially constructed around channeling occult energies. I think we're just about ready to wrap up here, but let's have a look at Larry Harvey himself. This is his own words. This is from the Burning Man website, right? It's instructions for people of how to go out to recruit people into the cult of Burning Man. Now, I guess the defense of this, again, could be, well, they were being ironic. You know what I mean? But it's, to me, is black and white. Here's how we recruit for a cult. So the first thing is we got initiates must be actively sought out and recruited. Our approach to participation is proactive. Be prepared to proselytize, seduce, or otherwise welcome the public into your cult. Which reminds me of the joke, how do you know if someone's a burner? Don't worry, they'll tell you.
Oh, it's like the vegetarian one.
Yeah. So the burners are very notorious for proselytizing. And, I think at this point, the Burning Man going for 30 years, the people that don't go to Burning Man are kind of sick of hearing burners proselytizing about it, At the same time, I know quite a few friends who thought it would be crap, and when they went there and saw what the thing actually is, suddenly became the biggest converts. And look, I was guilty of that myself. For many, many years, I did drink the Kool-Aid. I was a proselytizer for Burning Man. I was promoting it. I was sucked in. I thought the values I was promoting were good. And I think I have a much wiser and deeper picture of it all now.
You and I have both drank the Kool-Aid. I never went to Burning Man, but I was fully embedded in the scene. And, my first book is a testament to that, which my subsequent articles have exposed. But at least the first book, lays out a, path of progression on how I got to where I am now.
Yeah, and I think a key point for the audience, Jan, is that you and I aren't sitting up here saying we have all the answers, we know everything, and we're infallible. We can be wrong. But the thing is, when we're wrong, we're able to say we were incorrect about that, and here's the proof that shows it, and now we have this new proof, we adjust it. This is what the trivia method is all about.
Absolutely.
And I think also that for anyone in this process of waking up, you're going to go through the same things that Jan and I have, we all drink, everyone who's woken up at some point was on the other side of it, was fooled by these people. This is the most sophisticated use of technology and weaponized anthropology the world has ever seen.
Absolutely.
And it's worked on 99.9% of humanity. But thankfully, we have the internet. Some of us are waking up to it, doing our own research. And you look at the documents and you look at the proof that these people are liars to you. And then you realize, when Burning Man said they had a minister of propaganda and he told me all these things, maybe that was propaganda. Well, how come I never realized it was propaganda that I was being lied to?
Well, and a couple of things to start waking up is, number one, be honest with yourself. Stop using, fallacies. Stop telling fallacies to yourself to justify it. And number two, when you realize that you were mind controlled, when you realize you got MK Ultra'd, laugh it off, because that's the best way to keep it from happening again. One, admit it. Two, laugh it off, because if you're sitting there in denial, you know what? It's gonna happen again and again and again.
Yep. For sure. So just to come back to this slide, Larry Harvey's 5 simple rules for a cult. So after recruiting, you have to have some form of an initiation process. The initiates must experience a trial, a test, perform a ritual action, or undergo a rite. They must both act and be acted upon in some way that transforms their consciousness and prepares them to witness a mystery. I mean, this is pretty sophisticated stuff. And then witnessing the mystery, initiates come before access to the mystery is closely guarded. Mysteries should take the form of both a vision and a ceremonial rite. Participants must again perform an action and in some way be acted upon. And this particular one makes me think of all the ayahuasca ceremonies that are the rage right now. That you don't just go there and smoke it. You have to go on a pilgrimage to a remote location and go through some stuff with a shaman, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
And then the initiates must be given a token or a sign that represents their possession of secret knowledge and marks their separation from the uninitiated. And in the case of Burning Man, I think that's the Burning Man logo, which some burners go as far to actually tattoo or brand on their bodies.
It's like a Harley Davidson tattoo.
And then the pledge, the initiates must take an oath not to reveal their privileged experience to others who do not possess such a sign or token. And within the Burning Man community, a lot of is made of secrecy, of pledges, of non-disclosure agreements. Anyone who volunteers for the Burning Man organization is specifically forbidden to speak about Burning Man on social media. They have to actually sign a contract about it. And remember, you're talking about like maybe 10,000 people that are the volunteers for it, right? So these people are highly obsessed with secrecy. Why does a rave need such secrecy? I don't know, but hearing the cult leader saying the rules for the cult is the cult needs secrecy. Well, the cult needs secrecy because it's all part of separating everyone else from the outside world and all their traditional things. This last slide here, I've got 15 characteristics of a cult from the International Cultic Studies Association. And you've got the little picture there. Burning Man is a self-service cult. When you drive into Burning Man, you see all these little statements on the way in, and you're driving at 5 miles an hour. So as long as there's not a dust storm, there's plenty of time for you to take these messages in. You're subliminally getting whatever messages Burning Man wants you to get on the drive in. And these are created by Stuart Mangrum, the propaganda minister, the former Air Force intelligence agent. The characteristics of a cult: the group displays excessively zealous and unquestioning commitment to its leader. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or punished. Mind-altering practices are used in excess and serve to suppress doubts about the group and its leaders. Leadership dictates, sometimes in great detail, how members should think, act, and feel, including what type of clothes to wear. The group's elitist, claiming special exaltic status, or saying that them or the leader, they're on a special mission to save humanity. And Burning Man absolutely think that they're saving the world. There's a polarized us versus them mentality. There's burners and non-burners, and I just can't relate to you if you're not a burner. The leader's not accountable to any authorities, which is absolutely true of Burning Man. The supposedly exalted ends justify whatever means it deemed necessary. And this is why Burning Man doesn't worry about the rape kits. They don't worry about the deaths. That's all someone else's problem. They don't even worry about delivering to the people that have volunteered to build Burning Man into what it is over 30 years, any form of loyalty. They're just focused on bringing in new talent, recruiting them, and helping them go through the machine of washing their own brain. The leadership induces feelings of shame and or guilt in order to influence and control members. And they absolutely do that. That's one of their techniques, shaming and shunning. They're not even shy of it.
Not to get all Pavlovian on you, but we do reward people when they exhibit the behaviors that we like, don't we? Don't we show appreciation? Isn't that one of the great reasons why we appreciate, why we snap, why we hug, right? It's to say thank you for doing it right. Thank you for picking up your move so I didn't have to pick it up for you, right? On the other side, do we sometimes use a little bit of shame?
Yes. Sure.
Is it an effective tool? Yes, it is. So we use it in moderation, but public shaming, let's face it, is how we pressure our peers, right?
The subservience to leader of group requires members to cut ties with family and friends and radically alter the personal goals and activities they had before joining the group. And many of the converted burners talk about this, that they had a transformational experience, and whatever their life was before going to Burning Man, they've wanted to walk away from all that and try and do new things, or to incorporate the 10 principles of Burning Man into their business or whatever. I mean, it's very interesting thought, because I'm a businessman, and the principles of Burning Man are we exist in a world without money. I do not see at all how those two things can be reconciled. And in fact, Burning Man itself is a $40 million operation. They're making tons of money. So it's part of the trick of it. Like, hey, there's nothing to do with money here. Basically, it's funded by the patronage of rich people and possibly intelligence agencies. And the founders are driven by money. And if you were to take the ideas of it, go back to your business and try to incorporate the ideas of a business without money, you will lose your business. You're guaranteed to do that. I'm sorry to break that to you, but people are doing it. They're preoccupied with bringing in new members, preoccupied with making money. Members are expected to devote massive amounts of time. And Google goes so far as to give their employees one day every week where they can do whatever they want. And many Google employees use that to work on their Burning Man art projects and their art cards. The members are encouraged to live in or socialize only with other group members. And there are many off-site burner events going on, regional events and things like that. Burning Man definitely tries to do it. And when regional burners get together to socialize, for Burning Man's point of view, it's important that they do it within the context of Burning Man's 10 principles. So they can't just meet in a pub and say hi. They have to have an event where the money is gone and they dress up in costumes and all that type of stuff. And then finally, the most loyal members feel there can't be any life outside the context of the group. They believe there is no other way to be and often fear reprisals if they leave. So I see these characteristics absolutely applying to Burning Man. I think you've also got the Burning Man founders, multiple ones of them saying that it's the self-service cult for brainwashing. And you've got the Burning Man founders saying that this may be one day these principles could be the basis of a new world order. So I think we've now done a pretty good looking at the origins of Burning Man at the Presidio, linking to the Satanism and the military and the psyops going on down there, linking into the occult activities of building a wicker man and burning on the beach of Timothy O'Neill that was then taken up by Larry Harvey and moved out to the desert. So I think in the next episode, we will look a little bit more specifically at what is Burning Man in the desert and what does it look like, which will be part 5. So only by part 5 of this do we actually get to what is Burning Man. And then I want to delve back into the secret societies a bit more and the things you brought up, the Discordians and Cacophony and the Suicide Club.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Steve. Excellent presentation. This is really bringing things full circle for people now. I hope they can see it, and I see the next slide for part 5. Right at the top, it starts out with something that I'm familiar with. So,
all right. Thanks, Jan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Steve, and until next time.
See you later.
Bye-bye.